on the next one. They're based on a template that looks like this. Now, again, we're talking spheres within spheres as opposed to just flat, flat things, right, on two-dimensional paper. This is called a Partiki body template, or a Partiki body. It is the dark matter body. This is the part that science plays with the idea of dark matter because they can see something creating an effect. But there's nothing that's here in matter that is creating that effect, so they call the matter that you can't see that's obviously affecting that the dark matter. There is actually a substance that is called dark matter. It differs in certain qualities from the matter that you can see. And there are templates built on it. They occur in a certain stage of the creation process, and they're all interconnected with the other structures we've seen. The dark matter template is actually the elemental command template. It is where things like atoms actually first start and where they're actually manufactured before they come into materialized form. And there is in the natural organic structures, the dark matter template has what are called 15 gelesic rings. They're called hydrogelesic rings. So you've got the rings are the spaces between the lines, and the bands in between the gelesic rings are called crystal spans. Or it depends on what level, are these spans or rings or what? Because we got rings and spans and a different level of manifestation. They're called shields and fields. So you can think of it in terms of the fields of the rings and the shields of the crystal structures around them. This template becomes important in understanding when a materialized body, such as the planet, because this would be the point that would correspond to the planet's core, and there would be certain dynamics in that core of the template that would materialize in atoms and in atomic structure as the core of the physical planet. The core has what is called a pranoseed in it, and we had this whole long series of graphs explaining how it got there, how that grows and becomes what the template becomes what it is, and the purpose of the pranoseed. The pranoseed is supposed to open and close and spark when it does, which generates quantum, but also allows a direct flow of living energy between the dark matter template and the light body, spirit body, and atomic body structure. And that flow keeps the circulation going. When something goes wrong with the pranoseed and it is forced to close, it actually locks up, and that blocks the flow of energy into the dark matter template, and that starts what's called the Bardo process, or the death process, where ring by ring of the matter starts to pull away from the dark matter template, which means it starts to lose its core form-holding blueprint. Now, the sun has just gone through that on the 25th of March of 2007. And so it's in the process of having its rings pull away. The rings start pulling away from the inside, going outward. And I forget what ring we're on now, ring 3 or something like that, and 8 and 9, yeah, because something. 2022 is ring 15, and that finally pulls. There is a gamma burst that comes from the core every time a ring fully releases. So far, they haven't done anything where solar flaring or anything that could change. When it comes to a planet, this becomes very interesting because in this template, and we'll see what it looks like in relation to the planet in a minute, but in this template, those 15 gelesic rings are broken up into, or form into, sets of 3, and each one of those is considered a plane. All right, so there are 5 planes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in this 15 ring structure. Right? And each of the planes has 3 gelesic rings to it. This becomes important when we start to look at planet structure. When we look at the planet, and if you took a cross-section, you have the core of the planet, then you have the mantle levels, and you have the crust, then you have the atmosphere, and all the stuff that goes up to the magnetosphere. Right? This template is actually the key to understanding what is where. And there's some very interesting facts that go with each of these gelesic areas, because certain areas have certain characteristics, not only of matter, like certain areas are liquid. That's why we have like liquid core. There are certain bands, number 4, 5, and 6, will actually be liquid aquifers. They're called aquifers. And when we see this in relation to the planet, we're looking at just one-dimensional level of one now. Each dimension, for example, a 3-dimensional planet like Earth, it actually has dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3, and what is called its density template, or its density body, which would be the catheric level. So there's actually 4 levels. It would be 4 embedded templates. One, like if you take one and then times it by 2, that would be the next size, times it by 2, the next size. It shows you all these overlapping rings, and in those, it actually gives you a map. If you take a cross-section of it, it gives you a map from the core going all the way up into the atmosphere of what is where, what energies it's composed of, and what doorways exist where, because there are pass-throughs that exist in certain parts of this. There also gives you, once you have the base structure of that, and you're on a planet that has mutations like this one does, with the twisted, the axis is twisted, the Merkaba fields are all a mess, that will show in the template, in the light and matter body template that forms, where the natural structures will have impediments in them that shouldn't be there, such as the net fields that we've talked about. So there are when we see this in terms of the planet, you'll see this structure, but times 4, where there'll be 4 of these, the next one bigger, the next one bigger, and then times 2, till we have 4 of them together, and that will give the planetary template of the planes. So in one dimensional level, you have the 15 layers, or 15 rings, and which make up 5 planes. So if you have 5 times 4, that's 20 planes. You'll have 20 planes in one density level of a planetary system. This becomes important because in certain areas in between these planes, there are platforms of consciousness that can be activated and are being activated that will allow for safe zone spaces. So eventually those places will actually open, and there will be an interface of planes between here and the hosting systems that we're going into, where eventually we will be able to walk through certain grids, and if your DNA is keyed to it, you will be able to see the other reality field and literally walk out of this one and into that one. And that is what we're aiming for. What we get out of understanding the base template of the Partiki dark matter template is we can first see how, by taking a cross-section of it, this is still just one-dimensional level of it, but just by taking from here to here, wherever one of those crystal bands, right, crosses the vertical center line, draw a straight line over from it, and it gives you the vertical cross-section. So from a spherical map, you can draw a vertical map, which means starting from the core, going up, you can see what's where at what bands. This becomes helpful once we have it all embedded into the 4 together, so we can actually see what's interfacing where. And there's some fascinating things that are up in our skies, around, besides the Van Allen belts. Because we know where the Van Allen belts are, and I haven't even looked up how far up they are, but that's known by science, right? The inner and the outer belts and the gap between. We can judge the distance of how far up what is, as far as doorways and those kind of things, because the Van Allen belts give us an actual, physically verifiable location to judge the rest. Is it up above it? Is that kind of thing. So these spherical maps, which we're in the process of working on. In fact, we're going to be doing more of those in this workshop than we have ever before, really. And the vertical maps. These are the keys to, if you're going to move into ascension, where's the first place you're going to go? First, you're going to have to know how to get out of here. All right, I found a Stargate, now what? Right? Where am I aiming for? People do astral projection all the time. Half the time, most of the time, they're going down wormholes and don't know it. That is not ascension. They are not Stargates. There are ways you can use the facilities that we have organically. We have the organic ability to project out of body, and eventually we can get our DNA up to where we can actually take the body with us. But you want to know where you're going first. There are certain planes that are totally corrupted. There are certain planes that people, when they have, like, say, a natural death here, get stuck in because of the distortions in the light body structure of the planet. So when we start to see the planes, the vertical maps, we'll look at the spherical one in a minute. The vertical maps look like this, which is that cross-section, but this is after putting 4 of those layers together. So you see where each of the Jalizek rings overlay, and so you have 20 dimensions interfacing. So you'd have the core, and these are the different things going all the way up. There are certain areas that interface directly, because we talked about before how this Earth has been a hot spot for all sorts of warring type of activity, because its relationship in relation to the galactic drama, where the star planet called Eartha in M31 Andromeda is directly linked to the host star that Earth was seeded into when it came back out, when it was seeded back out in the Amenti rescue mission, which was Ashayana, So you have Earth, Ashayana, and they connect through the gates directly into Andromeda. So they were actually, Earth was holding the galactic host for the Milky Way galaxy. That's why it's been never peaceful here. Terra was doing the same thing before it fell. So anyway, these up here, these upper planes that correspond with different layers, I'm not going to read every layer right now, but this stuff is out there, and it's, you know, it's in various different workshops, actually, these. It shows you where the interfaces are, where up in our skies that interface directly with M31, where they are crossover points. There are certain things called aurora platforms that are in between, that are platforms that go through that space that I had mentioned. It's called the aurora continuum, that is between the outer domain radons and the middle domain edons, right? It's that transharmonic space. And the aurora platforms are there, and they are beginning to be activated now, because they will allow for a host that allow for ascension going through, instead of, because you can't go vertical anymore, because the gates up above have fallen. The Terran gates have fallen in the Pleiades system, and the gates up above that, the Gaian gates in, you know, the density 3 system, have fallen. This matrix is falling, and you can't go vertical because of that unless you want to end up in a fall system. So knowing where the plane structures are in our literally right here at home, this we don't have to like go all the way out into the middle of the galaxy to find. It's right here, right here on our own planet with us. There are certain interface points where we have the liquid aquifers, we have the crystal core, then there's something called the flame field, which is like a thermal vapor. Then there's a void space, then there are the aquifers. And whenever you see the aquifers, they come in at the 4th, 5th, and 6th Jaleesic layer in those templates. So they'll appear a couple times because you've got 4 of those templates now, right? So these are the deepest aquifers here. All of the aquifers will have these passageways, these natural passageways that are partially in the aquifer and partially in the lower mantle level above it. Mm-hmm. So there are doorways deep down there that you can learn to actually project through and eventually actually take your physical body through. There are what they call biomes in the middle mantle layer, and they are the crystal temples, and there are people who live there at certain angular rotation of particle spin. So we're not as alone on this planet as we think. There are negative aspects to some of these as well. They're not all positive, but fortunately there's a lot of positive ones. So up here, when we get up into the atmospheric ones, there are levels of the atmosphere, and again, we have where the Van Allen belts are, so you can tell which planes are in relation to where the Van Allens are, that kind of thing. So these are the projection maps. If we're going to learn how to first bilocate and then learn how to actually translocate and take our body somewhere, it's helpful to know where the heck we're putting it. Because when we get to the point where we can do those things, it isn't going to be like, hop in a taxi and say, hey, take me to plane 4 over there, right? It's going to be literally a visualization process, and at the speed of thought. Your fields activate, and bang, zoom, you're there. That's how fast you would actually go through the gate systems. You wouldn't go, okay, now I'm going to step in the elevator, and I'm going in the gate. It doesn't work that way. It's instantaneous and moving at the speed of thought. So anyway, the planes maps are very helpful. They're going to become more helpful as we
what
move
about
into
the Great Pyramid, because it contains aquifer, as you're calling it. There's a liquid part of it in which you can supposedly ascend through, and they used to use it as an ascension chamber.
They used to use it as a wormhole chamber. I remember that pit, the alligator pit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there more than one, though?
Yes.
In the Great Pyramid? In
the Great Pyramid? I'm not sure. I remember a big one. I just have like pieces of the cellular memory from times when I was there. Yeah, I was a female that hung around there on occasion until they killed me. I do have incarnational memory open with that. It's not one of my favorite places. Actually, the real hot spot they haven't figured out yet is Saqqara. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's actually more under there, but there are direct portals under Giza. Gate 4 is in the Giza complex, and there was always a fight over that one. It was always
one of the Amenti gates.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
So it is now interfered with.
Oh yeah.
And has been for how long?
Forever. It's actually where they moved the Ark of the Covenant passage in when around 9558 BC period, when the final islands of the Atlantean continent had gone under. That's where the Ark of the Covenant used to come down. That's a portal passage that goes from here all the way up to Andromeda. And they literally shifted it into Giza. And then, of course, Giza became a real hot spot to try to have the other guys take it away from you and use it for wormholes, which there was always fights over it. There were ways to open it that would lead to the ascension chambers, and there are ways to open it that would lead to the wormholes, and it was always very testy. But at this point, the Amenti gates fell in 2003 to wormhole control, the wormhole people control, which means the dark force, whatever you want to call them. I don't like to be insulting to them, but the self-serving ones, maybe, the ones, FAs. We just use that, just, fallen angelics, whatever. But yeah, Giza is intense, but Giza's gate it's taken over. It's one of the Amenti ones that's taken over. And we've actually had to recently assist the Guardians in bringing a portion of the Ark of the Covenant passage, literally shifting it back using Christic Merkaba mechanics back to its old Atlantean location, which is now in the water. But it can come, there's an area where it can come down through, so we had a trip to Ireland that had to do with that. Yeah, so there is a portion of the Ark of the Covenant passage that is still secured. And that means there's a part of the race morphogenetic field that is still secured, that is not completely under control. If you read in the Voyagers books, it explains the things that are supposed to happen with the Ark of the Covenant and all of that stuff. Well, the blue flame that was coming down from Terra is now reversed, which means it's carrying the opposite, the reversed coding, which goes with the wormholes, because of what happened up in Density 2 and Density 3 in the last several years. So right now we are doing the silver flame activations, where the Guardians have pulled a portion of the race morphogenetic field, angled it, because it's still in the core, but they've angled it. So it's the passage that goes with it is no longer coming down there, so it won't receive the blue flame. It'll receive a higher level one that is called the gold and silver one flame, which is the one that actually allows the activations that will allow for the transharmonic as opposed to just harmonic activation of the fields in Ascension. Okay. So it's been very complex, like the dynamics that...
No, but that's very good
Excuse
information. I do want to ask you, at some point they're talking about a Stairway to Heaven having opened up in Germany, and I'm wondering whether or not that's also a false stairway, so to speak.
Don't know, I'll ask. I'll set up the question, see what they say.
Yeah. I don't even know.
They just commented, they said, we'll talk about that later, remember Transylvania? Right?
Yeah, it seemed like an...
Because there's another one in Romania or something, Transylvania, that has recently been found in the last number of years. Somebody sent me a book. Yeah, Sarah sent me a book on it because she wanted me to know about that, and I asked the beloveds. And these things are part, I think, these are connected to the things we're going to learn about in this next workshop, that are the 12 plus 24 of the ancient arrow sites that originally were Guardian sites, but some of which got compromised. So I wouldn't doubt that it has something to do with that, but I haven't heard anything about it yet, but that doesn't surprise me. Half the time it's like, you just heard about it, and here's the dispensation. That goes that way. So we'll see if it pops up, but if not, I'll put it on the list of ask them about that, and if they want to comment, they will, and if not, they'll say not at this time.
I don't think that this is a positive. That was my understanding, is that it's been created, actually it's been created by governments that are working with probably with the Service to Self group.
Yeah. That would be my gut feeling on it too. Yeah. But I kind of put that, I call it File 13. I won't make a judgment on it until I get, direct from them or something, yeah. But I wouldn't be too hopeful, As far as all sorts of things like that, at this point, you're just going to go, yeah, right. Here goes another, FA activation. Great, another wormhole's activated. Great, they're doing another big meditation. Oh, wonderful.
Well, they're also,
they mean well.
Like an insider.
Some of them.
They're selling tickets to. It's crazy. Not literally selling, but for insiders and so on and so forth. And it's just a piece of information that I got. I can't even remember where.
I remember one person who was doing these, secret, big, important meditation groups with her ET channel people, and you were required to send hair for DNA. Like I went, no thanks.
That's not positive.
Right? Yeah. Anyway, to each his own. I'll stick with my diagrams and the Guardians. when we get through the structures that we were talking about in the vertical maps and look at this in terms, now this is just a black and white copy, I don't have this in color yet, but these are ones we're just actually bringing out in, we've brought out the material before, but the diagrams you could actually read because they're clear enough because they typeset them for me. This is showing the spherical map, right? And we saw the little one before that was just like a cross-section, right? This is showing the spherical map. And when you look at these more closely, I'm not going to analyze this here. There's other things that, you know, we've gone in depth, other workshops have gone in depth in these. But here's where you'd have the Van Allen belts coming in, right? So that gives you, all right, you know, that's up in the air. Coming closer down here, this is the D2 crust. That's what we're standing on. The D2 area, we're actually in D2, all right? That's the telluric realm, and that is what we perceive as solid from the state of mind, the D3 atomic level. So we always see, you see as solid what is exactly one dimension below your state, right? And we are stuck in the D3 state because of the DNA, so we are seeing the D2 level as solid. So this is the D2 crust we're on. This is then you'd have the level of the mantles going down. You'd have the aquifers inside there. The crust level always shows up at the outer ring around the 9 level, right? And that always shows up at this point inside of one of the catharogrids, and that applies all the way up. The mental body layer of the planet, this is the physical emotional body layer. The next one up would be the D3 grid, that's up here, and there would be the specific areas where the crust of the mental body is, where if you went into the atomic state of matter, that would be physical to you. If you went into D4 or even density level consciousness, which is the one step up, you would see that as physically solid. Right? These are reality fields that are going on around us all the time, and they are populated as well. Right? And sometimes we get visitors from them. Not all of them are positive. They started out that way, but there are these things here. 1, 2, 3, and there's actually one that runs up in here. These are net bands. We've got the, which one's that? The dermanet? Yep, the D1 dermanet, which is an etheric net. That runs where, let me see what level is this in, because you can find exactly where they're running. This, let me find my crust again. That's the D1 crust, sorry about that. This is D2. This is a little bit blown up from the smaller map I was working with. Here's the D2 crust. That was the D1 crust I was showing you before. This is the D2 crust. The dermanet runs literally halfway down in the upper mantle and halfway up to the ozone layer. All right, that is one of the frequency control nets that are controlling our DNA, our minds, that we're getting broadcast. You wonder where channels get their information from. Yeah, it's the intranet, actually, and that one's up here. That's the D2 level. That's up in the atmosphere, a bit higher than the ozone. Here's the ozone layer, and here's the thermosphere area, which is the inner atmosphere below that, right? So moving upward, we have the next net, and that's the intranet, and that's where the channels get most of their broadcasts from and all of that kind of thing. They're canned broadcasts, if any of them. These, if you follow it around, where's the Van Allens? Ah, the inner Van Allen's there. So this is right on right in the beginning of the Van Allen gap, right? So it's showing you. You can tell where these things are, where they're coming from. This is what the HARP stuff is all about, and various things like it. They are getting these things activated to kick them up for full throttle when they try to roll the planet, and that's what they've been. All this technology has been trying to aim for, was that final extinction, which they're not going to succeed at yet anyway. Hopefully by the time they get around to being able to activate this Merkaba and making us extinct, we'll all be gone anyway. Right, bye. Took the spanner gates out. So up here we have, this is the one that corresponds with the next level, which is called the density grid. That's the etheric level of matter in the planes. This one is called the ego net, epigenetic overlay net. That is the one that controls the chemical sheath around the DNA that actually tells the DNA what to do. So these are the biocontrols that are being used. When we have psychotronic warfare and things like that, where we're getting zapped with stuff, I mean, these are the nets they're coming through. There's a whole other set of technologies on planet that go with this. It's called the Caduceus network, and it's a perversion of the natural structure of that figure-8-shaped Navajo gate. They've learned to tap some of the energy off those and twist them into the Caduceus shape right, and run an artificial free energy system off it. And that's why we never got excited about the free energy system, because on the planet Earth there isn't such thing. It's siphoned energy that is being taken off the gates and helping to kill the planet more quickly because of the distortions on the planet. So there's a whole bunch of information that we were shown about how these systems work, how what the planet should look like, what the planes should like. We end up with more planes than we should have, because they're split. These nets actually split the natural planes, which means you end up with a regular one and a reversed one. The reversed ones are called hibernation zones, where literally whatever quantum of matter was there, it was put on reverse spin, so it disappears from here. It's not there anymore, right? It went somewhere. It's in the same place, but it's on opposite spin, so it appears invisible. This is where you have places like Shambhala, Eartha, all the other little channel control matrices that have been working wormhole systems in interacting and controlling here. Olympus was another one, yeah. So all of these things, when they started showing us this, it was just like, oh my God, right? I thought the Shambhala people were nice, right? That kind of thing, you know? It was heartbreaking. I was quite just bummed out about it, but also excited about understanding the planes. And of course, they never tell us anything that's really, really depressing unless they first give us the antidote. They're really good with that. They'll usually tell you the good stuff first and then show you what needs to be done. And you go, oh, okay. And then, oh, by the way, and that's because of this. You gotta go, ooh, yuck. So you know, where you might go, and not even pay attention enough to learn the good part if they showed you all of the negatives first.
But what's happening with those groups is that you've got their energies going into those particular grids and being siphoned off, in essence.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they're also being used as beacons to send energy in to the remaining grids here to control them. The people don't know they're being used that way. They're being used as energy conduits to help literally pull the planet into a black hole. And that's really sad, because most of the people who are being used in that way, it would be the last thing in the world they would want.
Right.
You know, because they mean the opposite, and that's really sad. But there's also a lot of the people in those groups that are actually incarnated out of the soul, the FA soul groups. And some of them, once a being incarnates, though, it has free will, even if it's out of a non-free will matrix, which is always a risk. When the FA groups decide they're going to incarnate and put their little soldiers on the planet, their soldiers might rebel when they realize, hey, we can make better choices. But they still have the DNA link, where they'll have a fight in their head. You know, one part of them pulling in this way, the other part that way. It's really, really difficult for people who are born with greater degrees of Illuminati gene code, because the Illuminati gene code is what plugs into the FA matrices, and nobody ever comes in alone here. We all have, you know, we came from someplace, and we all have family groups and that kind of thing. And if you happen to be out of an Illuminati family group that's a control matrix that doesn't give you free will and that kind of stuff, they will give you a hard time if you try to escape from them here, but that doesn't mean you can't, because you can. And there are certain things you can learn to do with your bioenergetic, I'm talking so fast, I'm tripping, with your bioenergetic field that will allow you to slow down their ability to push you and to make sure they don't come in your body and just take you over and that kind of stuff, because they can do that. And that's pretty standard way of how Illuminati deal with their, you know, renegades. You know, they don't give them a chance to be renegades. So anyway, these planes are here, but they are the negative ones. The positive ones are here. There are these aurora platforms that connect into the aurora continuum, and we've been progressively giving technologies and techniques to work with our biofields and, you know, in our bodies and our various levels of our bodies to bring in the currents that will allow us to begin to be able to go into these spaces, or actually more so open up these spaces where they're in the same place as the other spaces, but you could have two people standing next to each other, one activated to this time wave and one to that, and they'll see completely two different things. Right now, we're all seeing the same thing because we're all stuck in the time wave that's being run by the Metatronic clock down here. As soon as this other time wave starts coming in, there will be another option. And if we work with technologies that bring that other time wave into our bodies, that's why they give us techniques. I mean, every workshop, there's tons of techniques. We must have thousands of techniques by now, I think. Yeah, they progressively help to fix this part of the light body, then this part, piece by piece. We've been putting ourselves back together, you know. But eventually what this will look like, what slide will look like, is you'll have yourself activated to a certain level, and you will see a gate, and a person next to you won't even see it. You'll walk through it, and you'll disappear, and they won't know why. That kind of thing. And you'll end up where you would, there's a place they're going to have that's actually called the mirror ball zone that we're going to learn about in this coming workshop, and I just know a little bit about it, but enough to know what its end result is going to be. There's going to be a place with the higher earth planes that we've talked about that are invisible to us right now because they're on the other side of the nets. They're free from the nets, and we just don't see those matter layers because of the nets. There's going to be a place where part of those planes blend with part of our planes, and there's going to be a blend field, and if you have the activated blended time wave, you will be able to see both and switch between them, which means you would be able to slide from one reality field to another, and that is the first step in ascension from here. The next step would be getting to the point where you could make it permanent, because as long as your body is still partially running the time wave here, which means as long as you still have that cell donated by the piece of cell from your mother and your father, as long as that cell is still there and not released, you will be bound to the time frame of the planet in which that conception occurred. Right? So first we learn to slide, and then we learn to span, which is do the transfiguration and free that, so we are literally free to go into the living universe through the ascension passages. And that's what we're working on. It's the real deal. And I know it is. I remember teaching this in Egypt. I remember teaching this in India. I remember teaching this in Atlantis and in Lemuria and on Procyon. And other, it's the same thing we've been teaching over and over and over. It's the same thing that Jeshua tried to teach back then in the Jesus period. That was the person I call Jesus in these days. It was the same thing that before him, there were people in India that were trying to teach. These are the teachings. They belong to everyone. There's not one religion that they're a part of. They're the original legions of the Christ, which were the original, not just the CDD plates. The CDD plates themselves were just one part of the translation of the universal knowledge. There's a higher level of those plates that are called the something or other Alhambra plates that are from M31, the Alhambra plates. And they're crystal discs, actually. They're just starting to release information from those. When the solar crisis happened and it went into evac, they started bringing in the higher level information that had to do with the spanners, gates, and all of that stuff, because you weren't going to get out on the regular level of vertical ascension. You had to do the go in between in the aurora zone. Okay, so it's fascinating.
Actually,
anyway,
I do have a question about the CDT plates, as you call them.
Yeah.
My understanding is that these are actually physical, or at least they're in the 3D world here on the planet, and that. Originally, those plates were in Hawaii. They're hidden in Hawaii. Is that correct?
Not all of them. They're hidden in different places, but they would often take me to the Hawaii center they have. Well, through the Hawaii portal. It's actually the place they took me to is in the year 6,529 or something of Earth, but higher Earth. It's in the higher Earth planes. And before, when they were talking about it in the books, they hadn't made the distinction between the lower Earth planes and the higher yet. That came much later after we had things like this to show, what switched in what direction. But that's where they were taking me, and it was in those experiences that they allowed me to hold them. So I actually felt them and knew they were real, so I didn't think I just dreamed it, that kind of thing, because I knew I was like, I'm dreaming about it. No, you're not dreaming about it. You touched it. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Did I do it again? Yes. Right. Yeah, I haven't. I've had bilocation experiences so far with the crystal ones, the ones from Andromeda, but I haven't physically held one of those yet. But I'm excited. There's books that are supposed to come off those. The Kali Shatari book is going to be very special. It's the holy book from one of the holy book series from Andromeda, and they're holy because they explain our relationship with Source. They explain the paradigm that all of this is about, and this belongs to everybody. You can take it or leave it, but it is the way the universe works, and you can work with it or against it, and there's no big God that's going to get mad at you. If you do something a different way, or you go in the opposite, if you act in ways that are opposite to the will of Source, which was a loving will and giving free will, the universal matrix itself, just the energy dynamics it's set up on to be eternal, will give you consequence to action. And if the worse your actions get, the worse your consequences are going to get. And if you end up with yourself in a black hole and you're going to go in space dust return, it isn't because God did anything to you. It isn't because somebody else did. It's because you got yourself a bit twisted in how you were acting, and you were getting the feedback. What goes around comes around. What you're putting out, you're going to get back. And there's nobody that can buffer you from that. You can, pray and do 500 Holy Marys, and it's not going to fix that. It's being able to hold the frequency, because whatever frequency you're holding and however you're acting and thinking and acting, like conducting yourself energetically will be the consequence you get back and there's really nothing that can stand between you and it. And that was the agreement coming into materialization for everybody the first time they came in from the God Source consciousness field. So there's no big, bad, angry God in the sky, which is nice to know. It's a relief after all the religions telling us there was.
I never bought that.
Yeah. Are we close to, I saw you looking at the thing before, are we close to a tape running out or something?
No, we're good. We've got 19 minutes.
Okay. Is that like till the end?
No.
Oh, okay. We're just the end of the tape. Okay. So I'm going to talk really, really fast if it's 19 minutes till the end.
No.
Okay, so we go from those spherical maps. These also become flat maps, which of course would be maps like you would get, at the store, right? It's a globe turned flat, and they do have the Mercator adjustment, for the sphere kind of thing. So there's a lot on this. That's why it's a bit hard to see, but if you look closely, you can see it. This is actually showing where the old Atlantean continent was in the Atlantic Ocean there. It's showing where old Lemuria was, right there. It's showing a number of things. Here's the United States over here, right, in Florida down there. And here's Africa and Europe and stuff up here. All right. Now, these things here are interesting. This is the equator line, right? Now, if we look up here at the sphere, right, there's a little sphere up there representing the globe. The staff line is the vertical line, right? And that would be the axis that it's rotating on, the planet's rotating on. And then there's the chamber that runs front to back. And then there's the rod that runs side to side, east to west. These are all twisted up right now, by the way. They're not, like east is not east, west is not west. And we're upside down, actually, in terms of the natural, the greater maps that our universe is a part of. We're actually, like for Eartha, for example, Eartha is still in its natural position in M31 in relation to the larger maps that that's a part of. Its north plugs into the center points, and that's where those Cathara grids come in. The north, the top is north, is true north. Eartha in M31 still has its north in the north position. Our north is actually our south. We're literally upside down and then shifted 23.5 over. So it was 180 plus 23.5 shift. But to us, walking around on it, looks like, yeah, that's up, that's north, right? So that's what we work with here. We went through a whole series of things that showed the twisting and distortion of the rods in the chamber. Where is the front of the planet? Where is the back? Where are the true sides, right? We have this thing called the Greenwich Meridian that everything seems to be based on. This has to do with there are natural chambers that should run front to back and natural chambers that should run east to west. And these are all twisted as far as the numbering that has been put on here. These triangles here would be, now if you took that sphere and flattened it out, right, there are 4 points on that sphere where those rods and chambers come through, right? So you would be able to chart them. They come out along the equator line. If you looked at that, like I just put it in an angle so you could see that there was 4 chambers, right? So there would be 4 opening points. They're called fontanelles, where these chamber energies come through the front and the back, the sides, and also the top ones. So there are 6 fontanelles on the planet, 1 on top, 1 on bottom, and 4 along the equator. These are actually spinning vortices of energy that under certain conditions these are supposed to be interacting with the natural sun that has the same thing in the solar symbiosis cycle. But because of the planet being twisted, they're not. The rods have actually been split at various times from, I think the first was around 540 million years ago, and this planet was reseeded, this solar system was reseeded 550 million years ago, all right, when the fall of Terra happened. So it was very soon after that, in those type of numbers, that they first started to mess with the rods and started to shift things. The movements of continents and things has had very much to do with people playing with the rods when they shouldn't have. They've split them. At first it was just splitting them up, right, where now you had 2 versions of them, and they split it up to the tropic of, what's up there? Is it Capricorn or Cancer? Cancer's up, right? Yeah. So they split them, and instead of running on the equator, there's a set that runs on the Tropic of Cancer. And then the other guys, I forget if it was the green, we call it the green team and the red team. The green team are the Anunnaki, and the red team are the Dracs, right? The green dragons and the red dragons, etc. So we just use it that way, just to, instead of trying to, and there's 20 on that team and 20 on that team, the greens and the reds, let's leave it at that. So I forget which ones did it first, but then the others pulled part of it over at a different angle, but on the same tropic Capricorn. So now you have these things, Cancer. And now you have these things. Here's the natural part. A third of the rods were left where they're supposed to be, and they still spin as they're supposed to. Then you have the green ones and the red ones. I think it's green over here and red over here, but it might be reversed. I don't have the color version. It's been a while since I taught this, but you get the idea. In between them, if you get one spin in one way, one spin in the other, it creates a sinkhole in the middle. You wonder how that continent that used to be that big isn't there anymore? That one right there. They sinkholed it, which means they literally get those going. It creates a field that literally dissolves the matter, right? Turns it into an oscillating wave and takes it somewhere else. They took this to a place. Part of the quantum of this planet is now called phantom Earth because it has been taken into full fall zone. But we're in the net part. We haven't fallen fully phantom yet. And there's another part of the quantum of Amenti Earth that has stayed in the natural configuration, and that's called median Earth. And the higher Earth planes are part of that, are connected to that. We're stuck in the middle right now, and most of the grids are going down, while some of us are going, up as those grids go down.
Bermuda Triangle has to be in that.
That has to do with the wormholes, actually. There's a whole set of wormholes. They call them the Phoenix and the Falcon wormholes. They're right off the coast down around here. Is the coast of Florida or North Carolina? It's one of the Carolinas, yeah, right up in there. Then there's another set over here, the Lakistaki wormholes that the other guys control. The Buhara control those on the west coast. Oh, this is a mess. What they've done to this planet is heartbreaking. But the planet as a being allowed it, because it allowed itself to be used as a nursery. It was used in a way where the angelic humans were appointed here, not just here either, not just on Earth, but they were created to actually be the Templar guardians of this time matrix. And the ones that were seated here were allowed to interbreed with certain races who entered the Emerald Covenant for bioregenesis, which means if they were losing their ascension codes to the point where they were going to go into full fall and they were going to end up not being able to even incarnate back into a body that had ascension codes, the races that went into that type of trouble because of the choices they made in their existence and their race existence, if they entered Emerald Covenant, we would literally help them get their gene codes back, and that's how we got in trouble down here, where there would be, we'd be allowed to intermarry and those kind of things, and children would be born, and the gene code would be brought back in the next generation, where it would lift their gene code. But what it started to do was drag the angelic humans down, and then there were things done on purpose to sabotage the angelic human ones, where they got our gate codes, because our DNA was keyed to the stargates here, and theirs wasn't. They had only wormhole access that they would be brought through because it did not have wormholes in the beginning here. And they would be brought through on Emerald Covenant agreements. They could come through and heal. Earth allowed herself to be a place where this healing could take place. But the ones we healed took over. And right now you have what used to be an angelic human race and a whole bunch of other different races that looked very different, right? If you interbreed something enough and shut off certain parts of the DNA in this one and turn up certain parts that are similar in that, they start looking more and more alike. This is, the human is not even, what we call human isn't. This is a transposition of race identity look, right? Angelic humans look much more actually angelic. We're much taller. We actually have 6 appendages, 2 thumbs on each hand. An extra toe, and we're much taller and more fine-boned and that kind of thing. We come in all colors, right? All the skin colors, they were all created there to be first. There are people that were much more reptilian, that were in on the bioregenesis or helping the DNA to get its ascension codes back projects. So now you have people that are part human and part reptilian, part human, part Anunnaki, part human, part Draconian. Oh, it's just like Club Universe here, and that's okay. If we weren't all fighting and trying to kill each other. Because if you look at what is happening, what has been happening, our history on this planet, even the part we know, everybody's been trying to kill everybody else to get the land out from under them or to take control of their power and disempower them. It's been horrible. And this has been about race groups that hated each other. Right? Okay, so you have 6 different races that are coming in for bioregenesis, and if you take them back to their home stations, wherever their ET places are that they're from, they hate each other. This one hates that one, and that one hates this one. Oh boy. And the agreement is nobody's going to hate each other. We're all going to be nice. We're all going to do the Christic thing here and learn to heal and let that go, and we're going to get our gene codes back. Yes, a good thought. didn't work that easy because the others raided. As soon as some of their own that defected and came to get the healing of the gene codes, the parent races they came out of started coming in and messing with them and trying to get the human gene codes, because the human gene codes are priceless. They had the Diamond Sun DNA, minimum 12 strand. Some of them had up to 48 strands, but they didn't see those very often on the planet. So it has been a fiasco down here, but the Earth allowed this to happen. The Earth, as a being, allowed as long as time as possible. It allowed itself to be pulled into fall, but it will take the path of Kali Rama step back. It will not let itself be used and taken as food into the black hole system. So Earth is cooperating with us in this whole hosting movement. Earth doesn't want to hurt any of the beings that are on it, including the ones that have hurt her. The Earth is an amazing consciousness. And I remember a couple times I was just feeling so awful about, oh my God, our poor Earth, what are they doing to our Earth, And I could feel, and I got kind of like a verbal translation, because I have like this translator aspect to my consciousness that can take the direct impression. It says, don't cry for me, I'm all right. I'm choosing this path, I'm okay. But you need to be okay, and you need to help them be okay. And I was like, okay. It helped. And I knew it was coming from the Earth consciousness and asking me to raise my consciousness up a little bit more. And even though it looks like a horrible thing, and it's not a pretty thing, it's not pleasant. It would have been nice if Earth could have done her whole ascension thing. But Earth feels that this was the best she could do for the races she agreed to host, that she looks at all as her children. And that, it's like if you were a being, I call her she, she's really a he, she, it. It's a consciousness field. It doesn't have gender really in that way. But the Earth loves its children. And if this is the best it can do, it doesn't want to abandon the children. They're going to fall. It could have shaken them off like fleas a long time ago, but it didn't, because it loves them. So this is an agreement of a very, very high order with a being that calls itself a planet, and a bunch of races that are trying to heal. It's just when you're stuck in one of the little bodies as one of the beings in one of the races watching it, it can look very scary or harmful or, gosh, that's terrible.
Yeah, very diabolical. But this is an interesting dynamic to think about, which is that the Earth has chosen this path, the one we're talking about here, and allowing this, what you're calling an evac for the next 200 years, to allow the beings that want to get out of here and go other places to do so with their bodies or with just their light body. I think that is also a choice that we haven't talked about.
Well, right now, we still have the potential to heal the gene code enough where we can actually do physical ascension.
I understand.
That will change very abruptly on December 21st, 2012. Unless we do stuff before the fact to stop what's going to happen in the planetary grids then. Because right now, the human DNA is keyed to the planetary grids, and the majority of those grids are going into the 55 Death Star activation. It won't complete, but it will be enough to shut down the ascension codes in the biological bodies permanently. But I do know that somebody, might not be our group, we might be too old and tired, honestly, I don't know, because you use up enough of your quantum, and even if you can get your, put your DNA back together, you're just too bloody tired, right? So it's easier to bardo out and just get your spirit out and free yourself from the body, yeah. So we're not sure it's going to be, our group, it might be the next generation,
sure.
But there needs to be a group that does this, because if not, the human race will become extinct. If there is not at least a breeding set brought off planet physically with the ascension codes restored, what the human race was will no longer be, because it will have been mutated into something completely different, and those potentials will be lost. It will become extinct. Now, the consciousness will go in various places, but the race as a line in and of itself would become extinct. And that is not desirable, because there are still a lot of beings in the cosmos that think the angelic human race was a pretty darn good race. The Anunnaki aren't too thrilled with us, but there's a lot of beings that think it's a prototype gene code worthwhile having. And so somehow, there's going to be at least a small group of people who do get off into full ascension, get off this planet into full ascension. The rest will stay here. Some of them, after the gates close, the planet's still going to be here. There's still going to be people on it. But it's going to become more and more obvious, if it hadn't already, that being here very long isn't going to be an option. So there's going to be a huge rush for who can get in the air the fastest and out of the solar system, because they're going to realize what is occurring with the sun. There's going to be a Galactica-type scenario.
In that case, they actually, their choice is only to go by a vehicle, physical vehicle.
That's what they will try to do. The ones who end up staying here, and there'll be grid wars over who has the resources to build enough ships to get off.
Any groups taken off by positive beings at that time?
Right at the end. The vehicles would serve one purpose. If a being didn't have the ability of the DNA to pass through the gates, but still it was close, there's a certain level of protection and kind of like atmospheric support that the vehicle, especially the plasma ships, which are different than just metal ships, that they can afford a being, but they can't be permanent. It has to be a being that would be able to, if you get them through, they have to be able to move through and hold the change on the other side, right? So it would, if they could do that, yes. If not, they would just assist them off. Once the body died naturally, they would assist the soul out, or not the soul, because the soul's on density 2, the consciousness out of this level, right? So, but that's 200 years from now, as long as everything holds.
Okay. Well, I have more questions along those lines, but let's continue. We have 3 minutes. Are you already changing tapes?
Yeah, we're already
okay, I'm going to stop mine then and change
Oh, good.
tapes.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a break, actually. Okay, we were talking about maps, yes. Okay. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. I just wanted to show the fact that they exist and how these pieces fit together. We're down on the planetary level now. We looked at the planetary rods and the split rods and how they form sinkholes and all that kind of stuff. There's specific locations, longitude, latitude, of these things that, this information is published. I think it's one of the Sliders' more recent workshops. I think this was the Ireland workshop. But if you take one of those, those 4 fontanelles, right, where the rods of the chambers come out, each one of those points is a very specific point on the planetary grids, and longitude, latitude can be found. So we do have the longitude and latitude of those vortice sets. What they do is, through the planet, they actually come together, right? So you'd have this vortice on this side and the other one on this side, and when they make them spin, there's supposed to be a natural spin to them, but when they make them spin and they send them in the same spin set, and then send the other set of them into the opposite spin, they can actually crack the plates at the equator and shift wherever they want. They can turn one up this way and the other that way, and they could literally rearrange the plate structure, and they've done that before in small ways. What they were planning to do in 2012 was the final one, and it would have ended up in the one extinction that did take out the humans this time. They took us out twice before. This is the 3rd seeding and the last one here. But there were 2 other seedings of the angelic humans here that there were remnant taken off, and frequently in ships. They got some of us out through gates, but there was also some ship pickups because it was fast and you had to get them out fast before they weren't going to get out. So it's another one of those dramas. They didn't use the rods in either of those extinctions. A little bit in the first one, the 5.5 million years ago. They call it the wall in time. They used them, but they had tried to decimate the humans first, and whatever was left was taken off planet before they moved the rods at that period. So what we're dealing with is this amazingly huge set of mechanics that is so far beyond what our science can even fathom right now. They don't know what a fontanelle on a planet is. They don't know what a rod is. They're just saying, oh, I think there's something called torsion fields. Yeah, tube torus fields. Right. Yeah, we'll talk about torsion fields in a minute, because it's the torsion fields that aren't natural. Merkaba fields are natural, but unnatural Merkaba fields can be generated to create torsion fields, which are external vortice sets that can harness things and move things, and that is what is part of the Atlantean Death Star Merkaba structure. So when we talk about the rods and how they work as vortice sets, we also talked about briefly that this one, the one that goes east-west or left-right through the planetary body, is the rod. The other one is called the chamber. It has the front and that goes front to back, and that also comes out. This opens, this natural chamber at certain points opens. The rear part of it is referred to as the Bardo chamber, And at certain points in ascension, a natural process occurs where that Bardo chamber would open that allows for the different things to take place in a being's or a planet's body, that allows it to go into light structure so it can go through, you know, gates and go to another space. The chambers are opening on this planet. They have specific locations as well. And again, if you turn this around, you know, if you took this paper and bent it, you know, where you at least have the circular part, you would see that this point and that point are directly, you know, front and back from each other. What's funny is we had to do the calculations of where is the real front of the planet, because it's all twisted. The Greenwich meridian is not the natural front, back, or sides, and we have the calculations of what actually is the front and back and all of that. That matters when you're trying to line up angular rotation of particle spin with certain planes that are not in the net. Because if you get it going the wrong way, it'll go into the matrices that go with the wormhole structures. So they were teaching us the basics of understanding these things, so we understood what directions our particles needed to learn to spin in. There was a time when we were hoping to get some of the planetary grids out of the fall, where literally some of the quantum from here could be shifted, and it would almost look like, well, it would look like in the other places, in the higher Earth spaces that are also physically manifest, it would look like new islands appearing, that the land grids that we could get out. The chance of doing any of that now is very, very slim because of the thing that happened with the sun, the solar issues, and also the activation, the 55 activation that's going to take place in 2012. That can't be stopped. If they tried to stop it, it would actually implode the core, and you know, it would all be history. So the chance of getting grids through is not, like, as far as planetary grids, is not high. There may be little bits that can come through here and there. I get a feeling. I don't know, I haven't talked about it yet, so it's maybe a potentiality that's still on the board, but they're not going to talk about it until it becomes a stronger potentiality. But as far as the planet will go its course, it's chosen its path of Kali-Rama, step back, and that's good. That's better than Kali-Dima fall, because, you know, it's like, okay, I'll work with you, you know, the consciousness on the planet to a degree. I'll take this much, but I'm not going there, right? You want to go there? That's your choice, but I'm not going there. There's a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of Illuminati races here that they don't have an ascension code left in their bodies. They're not going to make it out in time. They need too many generations to regenerate those codes, and there's only 200 years before the gates close. A bunch of them are choosing also the path of Kali-Rama, step back, where they will go through their, you know, natural Bardo process and then go back through the Ring of Fire, back to the Edons, and then come back out and try again. You know, and that kind of stuff, where you come back out and you're not in false status anymore. Then it's kind of clean slate, and okay, your choices again will bring the consequence. So you have a chance to get the ascension abilities back, but you come back to where you started, like the frequency level where you started. So it's, you don't get to like come back and I'm up here now. No, you'll come back in the same frequency zone that, you know, in the outer domains as you left in Kali-Rama. So we're at an amazing point, is what all of this is about. An amazing point in human history, but also in galactic history. And the decisions we make now still, even though there's these huge influences that do interrupt our free use of all of our abilities to do whatever the heck we want and manifest anything we want. Yeah, we're dealing with a planetary field here that's a lot stronger than our individual fields are. So we have free will within the parameters of the framework we're in. But there are still choices we can make. We can still choose which path we want to be on and take the steps that are a part of that path. There are things to do if you don't want your DNA to go 55 Metatronic in December of 2012. They're not that hard. There are some things you need to learn. There are some things you need to learn to do with your light body. You need to know what the hell a light body is. You know, you need to know some of these structures. You know, you don't have to know every part and label every part, and there's not a test at the end of it as far as, you know, regurgitate the information. It's about getting the activations, getting your body healed enough to support your decision of the path you want to be on. There are people who will be more comfortable with the path of Kali-Rama. There will be more people who are comfortable with the path of Kali-Dima fall. Because they figure, heck, it's more fun, right, for now, right? That's okay. God source allowed in the creation, loved everything, created everything out of love, and imbued everything with its own power. It had the power to create as it chose. And we were given free will, but part of the creation was it would be an eternal life system. So that meant a set of physics boundaries were set in the structure itself. And that is what we play ourselves against. It's not God getting mad and sending you to hell. We send ourselves to hell, if we go in that direction. So we're at an amazing juncture in our history. This is just some of the gates, some of the gate locations. You're not meant to be able to read this. You need a magnifying glass for it. But these are the identified with longitude and latitude gate sites we know of so far, both the positive ones and the negative ones and the ones in between. And the list isn't finished. I have a feeling we're going to get some more this weekend. I have a feeling with the arrow sites. Yeah.
So, but is it possible for you to name some of the major ancient gates that are active or becoming active?
Well, one of my favorite is Machu Picchu.
Okay.
That's magical. Yeah, there's always a part of that stayed safe, even when it turned messy. We've gone back there 3 times. We've brought groups back 3 times. Let's see. Yeah, that's the only spanner that's been identified. Yeah, they didn't identify any other spanners, did they? No. Yeah, the spanners are those core gates.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
Yeah, they've been still on, they will interact through a set of gates that are referred to as the Ark Hub gates, the Ark of the Covenant gates, which are they were an interface system that if Amente fell, they would still, hold the passages out. They haven't given the specific locations of the core gates yet, except for one that's referred to as Shaylon 7. It's Spanner 7. And that is the one that's, it's actually in Mesa, Arizona, but it connects into Scottsdale and Phoenix. And we used to live out there. They had us secure a spot out there. So it's, so that's one. They're all over the place. I'll just read a couple here. There's so many, it's whatever. Bermuda was fun.
There's a Stargate that's, of course, very well known in Iraq, at least one.
Yeah.
And
that's SG-10, I think, isn't it?
Considered to be
that
one
one's
of
Iran.
the gates of Amente that was taken over?
Let me see. Which one was? I know Iran was. Yeah, which one was Baghdad? Let's see. Well, I'll just read them. The Amente gates, and the ones that fell. You had SG-1 through SG-12. SG-1 was that Halley at the South Pole. That's South Pole. The other one, we're sitting on it, Sarasota, Florida, the Gruol, and that's a control gate, and that's why we're here. That's one that we still were able to keep interfaced with the other interface systems where they couldn't take that, because that's a control grid for here. This used to be part of the Atlantis region in the ancient days. Then there's another. SG-3 is on Bermuda Islands. SG-4 is Cairo in Egypt, actually. Egypt, Giza and Cairo in Egypt, in that area. And it actually interfaces through several. It comes in through the big pyramid, Cheops, but it's also angled through into Cairo and into Saqqara and Philae, I believe, in those areas. So, yeah. Machu Picchu is Gate 5. In Moscow area, Russia, is Gate 6. Lake Titicaca, Peru, is Gate 7. And we went there, too. That was interesting. SG-8 is in Xi'an, China. SG-9 is in Bamtao. I can't even read it, it's so tiny. Bamtao is in Tibet. We wanted to go there, but the grids weren't safe enough to do it. SG-10 is in Abadan, Iran. SG-11 is in the Vale of Pusey in England. And SG-12 is in Montségur, France, and we went there as well. That's where the Cathars were massacred. Yeah,
yes.
Remember that one too, personally. Yeah, so they were the main Amente gates. Now, the gates that are using, there's a whole bunch of things also called Q sites, which interface with the gates. There's 12 of those, one for each gate. There's gates that connect into the parallel Earth stargates, which now are under the control of the fall force. There were let's see who else we got here. The ones we are using now, there's a couple sets that interface. They're called the Ark of the Covenant hub gates, or the Ark hub gates, and the Polarian gates, which are a set of Polarian gates that interface through that Aurora time continuum that I was telling you about. So let's see, where are we? Oh yeah, and there's the Trinity gates. They're the ones that actually will step down to a D3, because most gates you need a minimum of a D4, but usually D6, six-strand activation to take a body fully through. But the Trinity gates were designed to actually, if you had third strand activation, the three-dimensional consciousness, you could still go through them and go into safe spaces until you could get up to six strand activation so you could finish the process. The trinities are, this is so tiny. Let's see. Trinity 1 is Malibu Beach, California, Malibu. Trinity 2 is Belize City, Belize in Central America. Trinity 3 is off the southwest coast of Goa, India. 4 is Staten Island, New York City. 5 is southwest of something I can't read, in Tuscany, Italy. 6 is in the Andaman Sea off the coast of Burma. And that has something to do with a number of years ago, there was a tsunami or earthquake or something out there because they did something to that gate. The other side did.
Okay, but these are the Trinity gates, and you're saying they only require 3 strands.
Yeah, but they also require to be plugged into the other ones, the larger gates, the arc hub gates. But the Trinities are like a step down for beings that won't, if you had to use the gates and you only have 3-strand activation, you'd spontaneously combust your body if you went through, a gate that your DNA is not activated enough to hold the frequency of. Okay. Yeah. And let's see. So, I don't know if the hub gates are on this one. I think they put this together before. Yeah, the hub gates. We have a whole book on the hub gates, actually, a whole, spiral bound thing.
The hub gates is what?
Well, they're the arc hub gates. They run off the Ark of the Covenant portal passage between here and the Andromeda Galaxy. All right,
okay,
so they are secured.
5-strand? 6?
What were they? 12? Yeah, their base is 12, and for anybody to get 12-strand activation here, 200 years, not highly likely. That's why the hub gates, certain beings that come in with certain contracts would be able to use them if they were fully activated. But what they're doing with those, if we get those activated on the planet, which they have done, then they can plug them into the spanner gates, which you need 24 strands to be able to pass through alone. But then they're plugging them into the Trinity gates, which steps it all down. So the Trinities would allow passage of someone that has average, DNA activation levels. So there's a whole bunch of, the dynamics are very specific. A lot of when the Zetas were doing abductions, earlier in, a couple of years, 20 years ago, they were trying to figure out exactly how do you calibrate that beam because they were losing people in flight, right? Oh, let's grab that one. Oops. Seriously, just vaporizing people because it's all about frequency. It's all about electricity and how much electricity the body can hold and handle. And what we've been doing for 10 years is progressively building our body's ability to hold higher and higher dimensional frequencies. And now we're bringing in the transharmonic frequencies that come in from the Aurora continuum. So it's really the courses or the techniques that the Guardians have been giving us are the fastest way to get your light body, spirit body structure healed and your DNA activated because they are working with the highest frequencies that are available on the planet. But if you want to do a path of fall or something, it's not going to get you there. Right? If you want to go Metatronic, you don't want to do these techniques.
Sure.
Yeah, seriously. If you want to go, play in black holes and do a Battlestar Galactica scenario and have soulless robots roaming around or become soulless robots and try that out, well, that game is, do the Metatronic Merkaba because that's what it'll get you. But if you really want ascension and find out try to remember what it's like to live in a free system. This race has been raised, especially the third seeding, under no freedom. This has been a prison planet and a warring planet. It isn't like this everywhere. There are places that just aren't like this. And they're not socialist government and they're not communist. No, they're synocratic, where people just get it, and they act pleasant toward each other, and they wouldn't hurt each other, and they wouldn't hurt another being, and they wouldn't hurt their planet, and they make decisions based on that love. There are places, in fact, the majority of the places in the cosmos are like that. We are in an exception system, where all sorts of the extremes of free will have been allowed to be tested. But we don't always have to choose to be in that. But once you're in it, you need to finish the cycle and get back out, or you can get ensnared in it. So that's kind of where we are. That's why there's no hostility toward the people that are choosing the other paths. It's usually them being hostile toward us for pointing out the fact that that's what they're doing. It's like, sorry. But anyway. See, because if they had it their way, they would do all the twisted Merkaba mechanics, have everybody on the planet thinking that was great and doing it, and they're taking the free will away from people to make a conscious choice. We are showing, look, here's this body of information, here's that one. Compare them. See which one makes more sense before you just go jumping into any one of them. We tell people, go read that, go research that, sure, check it out. You know, if you're a little worried that its frequency might bother you, well, like run a Maharic seal and, you know, put a protection field around it and then check it out. You know, we don't tell people to avoid things. The other ones are like, oh, don't do that, oh, don't read that stuff, oh, it's bad. It's like, what are you afraid of? Seriously. And that's what it is. Because if you put the two main paradigms on the planet are the one coming through the Tothian stuff, the Paraclete order, that kind of thing. And there are two versions of it. There's the Anunnaki version and the Drac version, but it's really the same occult sciences. And they are teaching the Death Star Merkaba stuff. And then you have our stuff. If you put the two together, we have not withheld anything. We get it. It comes right through. It's given public. There's no quiet inner circle pulling strings. There's no, here, donate this. There's no, here, hand over all your possessions. None of that stuff. You know, and they like to say, oh, you're a cult. Why? Because we're giving power back to people. We're saying, here's what your anatomy looks like. Here's what cosmic structure looks like. Here's how this applies to this. And this is what the geometry should be. This is what they're doing. Just compare them. What makes more sense? If you like that one, go for it. You know? So, anyway. Now, one thing I would like to get through, I'd like to get through this pack because there's a couple of things that are significant. But one thing, I've talked about the word Merkaba quite a lot. And again, it means moving light body, right? And there's specific structures to natural Merkabas and to unnatural Merkabas, right? A basic Merkaba structure, it's called the Biveka Merkaba, which is the smallest form of them, is a star tetrahedron shape, right? If you look at it flat, it looks like a Star of David shape. It's actually known as the Star of Solomon, not David. But, yeah, that goes back into the history of Solomon and David and Jesus and stuff.
Yeah.
We are of the House of Solomon, not the House of David. That was Anunnaki, right? Okay. Yeah, and that's all right. Anunnaki's fine, but, yeah, let's just keep the history clear on that one.
Yeah, and I mean, I have some random questions that we can talk about at the very end. So
okay.
Just signal when that might be.
Okay, I'm trying to get there, actually.
No, it's okay.
You're getting tired. I don't blame you. I'm getting tired, too.
No, it's all good.
Okay. Now, any of these structures, by the way, if people want to learn more about Merkaba, there's quite a decent section in the Cathara 2-3 manual, the Cathara healing system, but the 2-3, second and third level, we talk about these a lot. But anyway, this is the basic structure of them. And the classic Christic Merkaba will have an electrical top spiral, or at least in this universe, has electrical top spiral. Some of them actually have a magnetic top spiral, not in this universe, though. But they'll have an electrical top spiral and a magnetic bottom spiral. The electrical one will spin clockwise and bring electrical energy in, and the magnetic one will spin counterclockwise and bring magnetic energy up and out, right? So, yeah, they are, the two cones do not spin in the same direction. All right, that is the big difference between a Death Star Merkaba and a natural Christic Merkaba. The natural Christic Merkaba will always have one of the spirals going in one direction and the other one going in the opposite direction. Whereas with the Death Star Merkaba, they will take one set. They'll tell you you have two Merkaba fields, one Star of David shape and another Star of David shape. You spin the one Star of David shape this way and the other that way. That's the same spin spiral set. That is a phase-locked Merkaba. That is a Death Star Merkaba. And they're combining it with the one from the parallel universe to make an unnatural blend between the particles over there and the particles over here to drag you into the Toro Rift time rip. All right. And the ratios are different. A natural Merkaba here at Biveka level starts with the electrical going at 33 1/3 spin. And it's, what is it? Rotations per trillionth of a nanosecond, I believe, is what that refers to. And the bottom would be at 11 2/3. And there are increments of speed that if you go to the density 2 level of it, it goes up to, the speeds go up. The characteristic one of the Death Star Merkaba is one of the numbers is, I think it's the electrical one, is 34, and they spin it counterclockwise with the whole thing, right? And the other is 21, which are numbers that are in the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci sequence is the anti-Christic spiral harness that is meant to harness the natural crystal spiral expansions, which we haven't even gotten into. So, I mean, we have all this, you can compare this stuff, and it's just a no-brainer when you see it all together. No wonder they don't want a public discussion. Anyway. So the natural Merkaba structure is that, and it has a specific speeds, it has specific polarity orientations. They call it a fin, right? Because when you're dealing with it, you're not just dealing with two cones. You're dealing with, if you take a three-sided pyramid, right? Two three-sided pyramids, one going this way and one, the point down, one with the point up. So it's a star tetrahedron shape. That would, be this shape. So there are, between male and female genders, there are differences in whether the top fin is pointing forward or the top fin is going backward and those kind of things. So we've dealt with all of that. We've got the polarity levels of them and all sorts of information on them. But what's most important is understanding, first of all, they exist, right? Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there, and they're part of your natural anatomy. A Merkaba field isn't just a vehicle that you activate so you can go through a stargate. It's an organic part of the circulatory system of the cosmos and of your own interdimensional body. Everything has some form of a Merkaba system. All right. To see this a little more clearly, it's the same drawing. It just shows a little bit better the radial field. Around the Merkaba field, there's something called the radial body, and this is part of the light body structure. It has what's called the trion field out here. The rayon field out here as its outer border. It has in here what's called the trion light field, and in here it has what's called the Miage magnetic field, and that is the natural structure of a simple biveka Merkaba. Merkabas also have what are called shields. That's the deflection field that spins as like a shield. Just like if you look at the Milky Way galaxy, the pictures of it, it has that big disk, right? Well, they have a disk that's caused from their spinning, and it also has to do with the quantum of energy that's spiraling out into expansion around them. There's a whole bunch of mathematics that go with that. But this one shows the shield a bit better. So you have your radial field, your radial body. It's called the radial body, the round areas, and they're not round, they're spherical, right, as opposed to flat round. Then you have the vorticets. The natural vorticets fit on the Cathara grid structure, right? They fit perfectly into that, and this would be the shield, and that's a spinning shield around. Now we have Merkaba fields around us, and the shield actually comes out and spins here, right, the natural ones. The other ones actually sit lower, and they're not supposed to. Right? There's a whole difference in how they fit. But that's the natural biveka Merkaba, and I believe they're 2 or 4 vector is how many vectors time vectors they can actually interact with. The next stage, after you get that far in activation, is this one, which is called a double biveka Merkaba field, which is 2 of those put together, right? And that would give you twice as many time vectors and gate systems, frequencies that you could process and move through. The next one from that, you're going too fast, is called the Akasha Merkaba. And this one, I believe these are 6 vector. The regular ones are 6 vector, and then they go up to 48 vector. But they start with this, where there's that Cathara grid structure again, right? They have a double biveka one at the top, a little double biveka one at the bottom, and this huge structure that looks like a crystal umbrella, right? And that spins, but these are much faster than the smaller ones. And at a certain point, this is the one that if you were going up the natural thing, if you could go up from density 1 to 2 and 3 and 4 and up to the Eka part, which is at the center, this would be the one you would activate to get up there. But since we can't go up the vertical chain anymore because the density 2, 3, and 4 in this matrix have fallen, right? We have to activate even larger ones that can go through the transharmonic, time shifts into the aurora continuum. So you go for this one, and this one looks like this. This shows it a little bit better. That's more of the structure of the single Akasha Merkaba. Right? And all of these mathematics are very precise. And the way things fit together, the alignments on some of these were brutal, especially doing them by hand. God, right? So just getting the Cathara grids to fit together the right way to make those maps was brutal. And then you have all these other forms that are built on them. They have to align just right. So, they're very precise in their math. And what's interesting is the math is actually held in the picture. When you look at that picture, if you did what's called optical pineal induction, which means you look at it and you can actually blur your vision just a little, which actually helps it to focus just a little bit, not quite crossed. Right? There's several spaces you can focus, but if you focus at a certain spot and this, breathe it in, it will actually begin the activation. You'll be able to feel the ripples, right, coming in. And the more you work with some of the other clearing your light body and healing your light body techniques and things, the more those things work much quicker. And you can look at a photograph once you have your vehicles operated, and every image you see has behind it an energy encryption, right? Literally a radiation signature. And that is how, once you become like, a rishi being that can move at will, an adept, you would simply visualize a place, and that would trigger the math in the system and tell your whole body system where to go, and you'd be there at the speed of thought. So it's quite a very neat process, and it is real. That's what's amazing. Here it's almost become kind of like a sideshow act. As far as, most people don't even think ascension is real. Some of the Bible people think the ascension is real, and they're expecting God to inhale them up into the sky in the rapture and stuff, and like, good luck with that. Right? Bless you. I mean, at least they still have some of the words. Right. The rapture is actually called the Rashapata, and it's actually what you do with yourself once you hit the transfiguration stage and you turn your standard mortal atoms into pataor, which are the eternal atoms. They're composed of eternal radiation that is no longer finite. So some of the words that have come through in not just Christianity but in other places do go back to the original CDD plates in the Mahabharata text translations. So anyway, that's the next level of Merkaba. That gets bigger. And next thing, and we've been working on this for a couple of years now, I think. You have the one we just looked at, right? The Akasha Merkaba. And then you have another one pointed upside down. Put them together. Forms this structure. It's called the Christ Star Crystal Capsule, right? And they are spinning fields. And in here, I don't have it on this drawing, but there are energy systems that come out. They actually look like wings, but they're energy as opposed to not solid bird wings, right? So this is where the concept of angels and things has come up, through our history. There were winged human type beings though. But anyway, the next stage is the Christ Star Crystal Ascension Capsule. This one will allow you to go in certain places. You can enter certain levels of that aurora transharmonic field with it, but you can't enter completely. Now, to completely move through and be free from it's almost like a mathematical ladder that you can go vertical, you can go horizontal, you can go diagonal, but you can't do this, right? In this one, you can do a little bit more of this, where you can go into the aurora continuum, but you still have more angulars. You don't have quite as much mobility of vehicle. The next stage, and this is what is needed actually to ride the spanner gates. If you were going to take a body out in a spanner, you would need one of these. They go from 24 to 48 vector. And these were just starting to activate. We activated the first one. We're beginning activations of the first one. And again, let's take two of these, right? Put them together and it forms a capsule. The one capsule goes along with what they call the Stardust Blue activation set, and we did that in the last workshop. And then the next one that we're going to do in this workshop goes with what's called the Starlight Gold activations, and forms another one of those. So you end up with two of these in the same place. And then there's one more activation, and these are all part of what's called the Silver Seed activation, the Silver Seed Awakening. We'll activate this huge one around you. That is the one that this can tumble in any direction, while this tumbles in any direction, so you can actually go in any direction in the aurora continuum. And it also does other things. There's also the structure of the crystal temples that we are assisting the guardians in activating on the planet at key sites, where they literally form, and if you have your DNA coded to it, eventually you'll be able to see them, and you'll be able to walk into them, and somebody standing there that didn't have it would see you walk and disappear. Where'd that person go? Did I see a person? I thought I saw a person there, right? Where you would see the structure, and you would know it was there. You'd see it like as an oscillating, thing in the air. You'd walk in, breathe, and go, yes, hi everybody, I'm on the other side now. Well, meanwhile, anybody behind you would be going, where'd that person go? I didn't see them, I mustn't have, right? So we are beginning to activate these, not just in our personal bodies, but the sites that were key to, the natural gate sites that were key to activating these. Like when we do the grid work here on the beach, we started activation of one of them last time. We're going to do the next one this time, so we'll have the double one here, and I think we're doing the initiation of the bigger one here. And then there are ways to spread that through the network, which we're going to work on here. We have these new activations coming through in this workshop that I didn't know about until like 2 or 3 days ago when they gave me the itinerary. They're called mirror ball activations. They're very, very interesting. They use the aurora continuum frequencies. And we are beginning those activations that will actually trigger these remote when you activate what are called the ancient arrow sites. And we're going to learn about that in this workshop. But it's like a blanket frequency that gets transmitted where all of the sites that are keyed to activate this type of transharmonic doorway will simultaneously activate. So that will be done during this period. That much. That just came in. I didn't know that. Sometimes I go, I'll be talking and then the line comes in, right? And they give me, oh, thank you. I didn't know that. So this is what we're working on. This is the kind of Merkaba you do not want to activate. Right? That's that twisted one with the same spin spiral set. It snaps its connection off to its natural center point. It can't build into those forms at all. It is very limited in frequency. It is I believe they end up as 5-dimensional or sets of 5-dimensional. They're based on like 5s, 10s, 15s as opposed to 12s and the natural codings. This is the Death Star Merkaba, and what did I say here? It creates an inorganic torsion field, which is that tube torus net field around you, and it also creates this yin-yang flow. You know the yin-yang symbol? I used to like those too. Thought they were cute. Oh well. They are the classic sign of the tube torus. If you look at them, it's the constant recirculation of energy. It's a closed energy system, which is what these are. They're closed from bringing in this circulation from source. They're closed from allowing something to circulate back out. There's no inflow and there's no outflow. They've got a set quantum that's at their core, and they will burn out if that quantum isn't fed. And that's why these are used, the torsion fields that they generate are used to suck energy off living things, to draw them into their core to keep them going. They are vampire machines. And the beings that run on these are vampires. They just don't have big teeth and suck blood. No, they suck energy instead. So that's another difference between them, between the styles. I'm not going to go into all this heavily. I might as well. All right, I'll finish it. All right. I was going to say, I'm sick of looking at these. But I just got a nudge. Just finish it. Okay. This goes along with the Death Star Merkaba. Again, you have that Bloom of Doom configuration that pulls the Cathara grid into an unnatural, skinny, elongated configuration that does not have 12 gates on it. And it creates the bulging in the field. Look at how humanity, I mean, we're supposed to be long and lean, right? It's a struggle to stay long and lean on this planet because there's this weird thing that happens in here where it's like, I felt some of these when some of the Metatronic activations happen in the grids. It almost feels like somebody grabs you in the middle of your spine this way and goes and pulls them and compacts them together, because that is what this thing does. It compacts the energy inside of it and squashes it down. That's why the Earth actually has the bulge around the equator, because it's being squashed, right, pulled in. It creates that poison apple field around you, and our fields would look just like the planetary fields with this, and this is what they will stay as unless we do something to change it, and that's why they're showing us this, so we say, maybe we should do that. Yeah, let's change that. And here, like, you can forget the sun part, but again, you would have the torsion field net around you, and that would be controlling your horizontal, controlling your vertical, like that Twilight Zone or whatever. It wasn't Twilight Zone, it was Outer Limits, I think, that used to say that. And you would have the closed circulation system. This is a system that actually is cut off from the flows of the spirit body. What it does is it takes a portion of the light body quantum and twists it in reverse to create a false spirit body. So there's two flows, but it completely blocks any inflow from the actual genuine spirit body. And it traps the consciousness, the part that's stuck in the atoms, right, from the rest of its own identity. And it's really just a really sick technology. And it also creates these, they call these the trumpets. There's a little picture of them, but where you have that poison apple configuration, it creates these big vortices up here. They're almost like satellite dishes, and on the planet, that's exactly how they work. And they move with the wobbles to pick up the signals coming from galactic core through the black holes, coming from the parallel system, and keeps us locked in. It's literally a set of satellite dishes. There's also a set that comes out here and here. It's a nasty machine. So we can undo this in our own fields, but it isn't something you snap your fingers and say, oh, I wish it away, it's gone. Good luck with that. While you're on this planet, it takes work, and we've been doing that work. Ultimately, what that mess is made to do is, remember, these are maps.
1 second here. I just want to open, because the
light's going.
So yeah. A little bit of the light. If you could pull that curtain now that we can just do a little bit more light. Lose too much here.
Yeah.
And if there's the stairway light, is there a light on the stairway?
Yeah, that'd be good.
That might help. It might help. As long as it's not too much of a backlight.
Doesn't do much at all, does it?
Yeah, that's better.
You know what? The light up there might help better. There might be a light on the fan. I don't know if there is actually. I can't see that far.
But
How about that one? Would that help?
I think we're better here.
Okay. Would that light help at all? The one behind you?
Yeah, actually.
That's a bit better, I would think.
Yeah.
Okay. So, excuse me. Just for the final on the messy Death Star Merkabahs, if we remember that these Cathara grids interwoven, right? This is one Vecca system, right? We'd have our universe here, our parallel would be here. These are meant to link the parallels unnaturally, to force them together into a harness field, and that can be dragged and ripped out of its matrix and taken to wherever they're pulling it from. So this is what the whole purpose is. It's a feeding machine, and that is the Death Star Merkabah. And it's built. It looks like we talked about the light units that are built on the Vesica Pisces. It actually creates fields like that and then pulls those Pisces together into one harness. And it's a completely unnatural way. It just distorts and totally twists the natural laws of physics as they apply in the eternal life universe, and it creates a finite life one. And what it can do is temporarily sustain whatever is in it, as long as whatever's in it can feed off something alive, because it can't generate its own quantum. So it has to continue feeding. And there are systems that are built on that. Their bodies die, so they clone another one and try to stick their consciousness in that until that wears out, and they keep doing that. And if they get to a point with cloning where it just doesn't work anymore, and they can't even sustain a biological unit, and that's when they start going to raid other things for gene code, where they can start getting things that they have any compatibility with that they can start building again, because they end up as consciousness that gets stuck in a ghost-like form because it doesn't have a biological form anymore, and that limits the arenas it can play in. So some of them, do those games to save their race and give them back a biological, presence. To each his own, but that is not ascension. So these are what we are teaching about to show how they're supposed to look. The other structures of those progressively building Merkabic structures, that is ascension. That is what your fields are supposed to do. That is what the living cosmos is built on. Now, this stuff, let me see, what is most important? Evolution is understanding. Right. Yep. Oh, this is just a little chart. This had to do with, this is a summary of how many years of work went into all of these. It's a summary of from the creation point, the stages of creation before you get to. This is the re-evolution. When creation starts, and a being or thing or a cosmos or even an individual begins a new life, a new creation. It can be the creation of a new cosmos or an egg and sperm coming together to create the potentiality for a new baby to be born here, right? There's a whole set of cycles that happen. There's the creation and evolution of the eternal consciousness, and it works from the microcosm to the macrocosm. All right, we have the pre-Pardikai creation cycle, which is something we learned after this chart was made. They actually taught us these things, then took us back to what happened before that, right? Then there is something called the Navena and Nuvena Pardikai birth cycles, were just these Pardikai units of consciousness, primary units of consciousness, the primal substance of creation, where they are born. Then there's what is called the Siddha Akushate cycle, and this is where the spirit body is born first. And then the light-born cycle, which is where the light body is born. Then there's something called the star-born cycle, which progressively, these are different aspects of the light body, spirit body, physical body that are birthing, and there are specific cycles and time periods. Like if you're going to take the point of conception, for example, there's a specific point. They start with 12 seconds, then 12 minutes, and then 12 days after conception. What parts are occurring, and it ends up in the gestation of the baby, and then the baby coming out, and that kind of thing. We have the life-born cycle, then we have the God-born cycle, and there's a series of, these had huge graph series with them, and huge explanations of, what the processes were. And finally, you get to the Christ-born cycle, K-R-Y-S-T, and this is that point, that still point of turnaround, where a being fulfills and activates all of its frequencies in its template, its natural frequencies, and is able to go into the Christ star vehicle and disappear from the outer domains and go back into the Adashi return domains in their Ashayana body, which is that is the one that has gone through the Rashapata Ur, which is not that rapture. It's not somebody yanks you up from the, it's literally you've transfigured your mundane atoms or your mortal atoms into eternal life substance atoms. And you will hold the form of that body. That will be what you look like the lifetime that you do that in will be the form that you have. But it will be a form that you can choose to change at will. You can choose to have no form. You can choose to have your main form as being an orb, which is like, it saves on housing. Seriously. Think about it. If you just manifested a body when you needed one, right? Hey, I'll go interact there. I'll, be a cat today or whatever. But anyway, at the end, it starts somewhere, and the expansion cycles end somewhere. And they end, naturally, when they turn back around and start going back in towards Source. And then there's the whole thing. If a being goes through that, goes through the Adashi return cycles, returns as whole with their full memory matrix. That's the difference between doing space dust fall and returning as space dust. Your memory matrix is shattered. You just, you're still precious to God's Source, but you're undifferentiated units of consciousness. And when you go back whole, then you can actually birth as a star, where what was once, say, a being, a human being, can actually go through this cycle, and the next thing they will incarnate is a star. And that's a whole different level of evolution that you probably can't even put words on while you're in a human form, in these languages. But this is what evolution is really about. What Ascension is about is natural evolution, organic evolution. And that's something that this place is losing touch with hugely. And eventually this knowledge will be completely gone. They don't want this knowledge in fall systems. Yeah. So they usually get rid of people who carry it. But fortunately, this is still a blended system. That's why we're still living and breathing and still trying to say, yo, let's go. For the Christ Star Train. Whatever. Anyway, all of those cycles each had, this was a summary of the massive diagram sets just from that one cycle, just to give you an idea. This was just showing the Starborn cycle. And each one of these was a full page with all explanations of all the pieces and parts and all of that. So it's just an amazing structure. The structure they have showed us, the processes involved with those structures, it's just, I look at it and just go, wow. I might not like the job because I'm exhausted because the workshops are always crazy with time and everything, and it doesn't go the way I wish it would as far as that. But look at this stuff. How could you not go out and teach that? I'm so grateful to know this, because no matter how bad it is out here, no one can ever take home away from me again. I know it. I feel it. That feeling that I always had of that connection to God's Source, it just went whoosh, and expanded like, right, gotcha, right? No more fighting with those little God concepts and warrior gods and, God sends you to hell. Well, that's not the God I know, right? There's a feeling, a presence of that eternal, creative force, the God Source, whatever you call it, doesn't matter. It doesn't care what you call it, right? That's a, human thing. Yeah.
I have a question here, because this Starborn cycle, are we talking that, for example, the Pleiadians and Andromedans, have they gone through this? Are they still going through it? At what stage are they?
The Andromedans that we're talking about, from Eartha and those guys? Mm-hmm. Well, everybody goes through this, actually. A fertilized egg in the womb goes through this. And it's right at this point, where's the dyad? Right here. At this point, the light body has grown this big. You got the physical body growing in the womb, right? You already have the spirit body that's already huge, right? That Lumeridana one with all the probability dominions, right? And we're talking about a fetus here, grows to be a baby. And when the birth point happens is when this cell of the light body grows. Then through the process, they call it the birthday chart, through a very specific process of accretion of frequency, taking it from the spirit body into the physical form, bonding the spirit energy with the atomic form and therefore expanding the atomic form, the light body simultaneously grows. When it finishes that cycle, it will go into what is called the unici seed atom. It will become, the full core of the light body structure from which the rest of it grows. But we have these structures out here. To get out here in the outer domains in incarnation implies we started at the core, came out to the inner, then to the middle, and from the middle came out to here. So we have these structures behind us in time in that regard. So they're part of our extended anatomy that goes with our extended family of identity with our other simultaneous incarnations. Does that answer whatever the question was? I lost track of the question. I'm sorry.
Because what I'm trying to do is, in other words, if we have certain, you call them guardian alliance, guardian beings, that are coming to help sort of rescue the planet at this time and bring in the ascension mechanics and so on. These individual beings are at a stage in their development. Mm. And where are they in this chart, or are they on another chart in their development?
Some of them, now the Guardian Alliance has millions and millions, probably billions at this point because of the levels we're dealing with, of members. Some of them are in various stages ahead of ours that are still in a 15-dimensional time matrix, that haven't gone through Christ Star evolution yet, but they're still working toward it. But the ones we are dealing with now that give the information, yes, and that are actually orchestrating this loadout evac, they are the Adashi Ascension adepts. They have completed this process. And they are in those cycles, those Adashi cycles, that after the expansion you make the turnaround and you go back. And they are in those 3 Adashi cycles that are going back towards Source. And a few of them are actually, well, they wouldn't look like beings as we call beings here. They would look like stars or suns because they have completed that. So it was funny, we kept having mission upgrades, right, where, okay, we're talking to this group, we had the general ones from the Guardian Alliance, then we had the Iani, and then when the drama escalated more, the Adene came in, and then the Adandrea, and then there was like 6, 7 upgrades, and then we met the Aquafarian, and the Bende Aquari, and the the Aqui and the Aqui-L, and these are the ones they've gone through the process. So because at this point, it's the only way to get off the planet is going to be using these spanner gates. So you can't actually teach somebody something like that. They couldn't just tell us what to do if they don't actually know it themselves. And it's kind of funny. It's like you can't give what you actually don't have. And it's, when I do the teaching stuff, when we come in, it's what I like about the workshops, even though I hate it at the same time because it makes it frustrating because I don't have my program to walk in with. But we all learn at the same time. Where the wave comes through, I learn it right there as it's coming out, right? Say, okay, they're saying this, right? And this is where I'm up in the room going, okay, it's this, and then have to explain it. We all learn it at the same time. But if you don't have a certain frequency in you, you're not going to be able to convey that frequency to someone else. So in order to, it keeps us all in a very interesting space, I find, where there's not some elite member that knows everything and walks around with their nose in the air and just floats on clouds and that kind of stuff. I learn it, they learn it, right? It just goes. I just happen to be the little drain pipe it comes through, but we all learn it at the same time. So it's all very, very even. There's not a hierarchy of snobbery. There's not a oh, I'm more spiritually aware than you stuff or anything like that happening. And I like that about it. Anyway, where are we? Where am I? Some of these I don't have to go back through. Oh.
We have 7 minutes on this show.
Okay. You probably never ever want to interview me again. God, she never shuts up.
No, I think there's no reason why not. Put it all out there.
Well, it's a free workshop anyway for anybody watching the tape.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Right. This one is just to point out. This little bit down here is just a micro version of those probability maps that we showed where the Milky Way was, where M31 was, where the parallel is. This is just showing that these configurations, actually, there's a microcosm of them actually running in our heads and in our bodies, so we're directly connected to them. There's certain vortices that connect us directly to certain spaces here. One of the spaces that we first opened, it has, what do they call it? The is that the Ashayana vortice? I think they called it that, yeah. It was actually the first part of the host where we could bring the frequencies through the mess that is in the galactic core and actually have a tunnel of information that would be able to reach us here so they could continue bringing in the frequencies and the information. That manifested here through our own mechanics and in our brain. It's actually a vortice that comes out to the right and goes up, and you can feel it. And they're also teaching us how to project up and meet them halfway. So we orb up and meet them and we go, whoa, and they'll come down. And sometimes we'll use projection versions of ourselves, or sometimes we'll just hang out and orb and do direct cognition. But we're teaching people how to do this. They would like people to learn how to do this, because people do need to be walked through this process. This isn't a simple ascension cycle. This is a mess down here, and there's very little time left to fix that as far as DNA and things. That's why they really are extending, as much as they can to assist us with that. The only thing they won't do is walk into our bodies and take them out for us. That's not allowed. Right? Just like they don't allow the channeling, where they won't, come into your body and use your face and talk to people. No, because that can actually violate your DNA, right? Not to mention theirs. So it's just to show, there's lots more that showed at the time in that workshop, but it's just to illustrate that those maps and everything and the frequencies that are running there are directly connected right into our biology. They're wired right into our brains, right into our electric systems, as well as our subtle body fields. What the whole thing comes down to, really, is the battle of the spirals.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Then we can take a coffee break.
Yay! Okay, can I do this in 5 minutes? 1, 2. Ooh, I might be able to. Yes. Okay, if I talk really fast. Alrighty. What we're looking at here is, again, the Cathara grid in its natural proportions, right? Which gives the mathematical proper proportions of eternal life, creation, whatever it is. Now, you'll notice there's this spiral coming out. It's a very specific spiral based on 45-degree rotations and expansions of the Cathara grid, which is the natural structure of expansion that a spiraling Cathara grid would do. There's a spiral of energy that comes out from the center, right, and expands out into creation. These are core creation spirals that begin the energy, feeding the energy out into the, what become the other outer structures, right? What you have over here is what is called the fib of no chi spiral. Well, it's actually Fibonacci, but we call it the fib of no chi because it has no chi as a certain type of energy, right? It actually steals chi. Now, this is built on what we call the golden meanie rectangle, because the proportions of this are not divine at all. These are the opposite to sacred geometry. These are Metatronic geometries that are part of the Death Star system. The Fibonacci spiral, actually, it has to do with the Death Star Merkaba that attaches its core to a living thing, and then from there starts siphoning energy from the living thing, and it actually will expand out with the living thing, but at a different proportion. It starts with 0 because it has nothing to start with. Then it goes 1, and then it eats the thing before it. 1 plus 0 is 1, so it goes 0, 1, 1. Then 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. It eats the thing before it to grow itself forward. All right. What this does is it starts out with 1, at its 0 point, but it starts expanding out on 2s, where it goes 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 8, 8 times 8 is 16, 8 times 2, sorry, etc. So it goes in increments of 2. So there is a sequence, just like there's a Fibonacci sequence, and these are growth expansion mathematics. You can find them in trees and plants and things, and seashells, and if it's running the Fibonacci, you can tell it's a Metatronic organism. If we're eating Metatronic organisms, for example, plants or something, we are bringing more of that into our bodies, which means we are amplifying whatever Metatronic portions of our DNA that we have. And the same for the other spiral. This is called the crystal spiral. It's the natural expansion spiral, and it keeps going. Now, what this spiral does, and the spiral as a result of the various components of the Death Star Merkaba, is it comes out, right, attaches itself to the living thing. It spirals out. The living spiral is actually bigger, but here it overtakes it, right here, and harnesses it and actually pulls its energy this way. And that's where it starts using the energy and taking it this way into a smaller, tighter harness, and starts changing and starts compacting the Cathara grid, where it starts pulling it in to that other shape, and the sphere, natural sphere the big one would form, the crystal one would form, starts to become that thing that bulges at the thing. It's a vampire spiral. What we are looking at in the coming between now and 2012 is Battle of the Spirals. Okay.
Okay, we're going to have to stop right here.
Okay.
We won't be able to get another.
Yeah, running duck.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it, though. They've been throwing stuff at me for so long. At this point, it's just like, whatever, I'm Teflon.
The one thing that may become a problem, I'm trying to remember the lady's name.
Willow.
Oh yeah, you want me to move over?
Just back a little bit,
Yeah.
or at least after you adjust the sheets, because your shadow falls out.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Impact our lighting. Okay.
Sure.
Beautiful. Thank you.
going. Are you guys on?
We're on.
You ready? Okay. And we're rolling. Go.
Back again. Alrighty. We left off on the dueling spirals, the eternal life crystal spiral, and the Fibonacci or Metatronic finite life spiral.
You don't.
I don't. It's over here on the couch.
Put it up a little higher.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay, go
So,
ahead.
do I have to repeat that?
Yeah, just.
Okay.
Just in case.
Alrighty. Well, we left off on the dueling spirals, the eternal life crystal spiral, and the Metatronic or Fibonacci spiral, which is part of the Death Star Merkaba technologies. These spirals, again, are actually the core currents of energy that spiral out for the expansion of any form, be it the light body or the spirit body. These spirals come out from the core quantum, and the core quantum in the eternal life system is the infinite God source consciousness field. So with the crystal spiral, it always maintains an open connection with its source, with its center point, where the Metatronic spiral does not. It doesn't even have its own center point when you look at how it's constructed on the golden mean rectangle. Well, the spiral will come out, the crystal spiral will come out. Now here is an interesting configuration. It looks like an upside down leaf with a little flame in the middle, right? What this is you have one spiral, crystal spiral, that comes out in expansion clockwise, and that's in what's called the Itori side of the cosmos, because every one of these spheres has one that also spins in the opposite direction, which is called the Adore side. So we are in the Itori systems, and the expansion of the spiral, or of the energies there, is clockwise. At the same time, there is another quantum and a spiral that counter-spirals out on the counterclockwise rotation, which is the expansion spiral for the system that goes in the opposite direction. Just because it's going in the opposite direction doesn't mean it's negative. This is the structure where you have the Itori side and the Adore side. If you have something spinning clockwise, there is another one that is a companion that spins counterclockwise. The systems are separated, even though they're in the same place. They're on opposite angle of rotational particle spin, so they're invisible to each other. They pass right through each other. But these spirals are synchronized with each other. So the crystal spiral spirals out on they refer to it as the electrical spiral, spirals out on the clockwise, and then the more magnetic one spirals out on the Adore side. And at a certain point, they cross over and meet at this axis, right? And this is only showing a little bit of the expansion, like where it comes out from the center and does one round, same with here. There's a whole set of things that happen when eventually they meet up here. And in the first cycle, before they meet here, they actually meet here, and there's something called a flame cycle, a flame shift cycle, where when the two currents meet, they merge and do a replication and create a flame, the eternal flame, the living flame, and then that shifts to this position. So you have the eternal flame from the first time they encountered each other in the small set, like with the small set here. This is showing it did this one round small set, then it's coming out again. When they come out again, they cross over down here. And this creates certain passages. There are certain things that it's not just this spiral, but there are these little spirals that come out on each of them that form those little petals that come out on each of these what are called octants, these breakdowns that are actually part of the time clocks of how these work as far as the time cycles, how they work. So you end up with the main spiral, and then these smaller spirals that send energy back and forth through, and that's what forms that petal effect inside. So at certain points, now this is actually a time cycle that has dates plugged in that started with last April of 2009. Right, when certain activations took place that put us in this, like this is the last round of this cycle, the round of the spirals, which means there's going to be the place of the crossover happening here. But before that, there are these axes right here, this one running here, which is the zero line, because this is where actually the spirals start. This is the zero line. And I believe that's the 4. And like when you're counting them, that's would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 axes, right? And 5, 6, 7, back to 0, 0, 8, right? Right here, there are certain currents that come out here that are referred to as the monadic passage. That's where the spiral goes from being in one density to expanding into two densities. So going from a three-dimensional spiral to a six-dimensional spiral. That opens something called the monadic passages. And they allow for what is called the formation of the Jade body, which is a six-dimensional. It is a six-dimensional body that is transharmonic, that activates those they call them the Amareya Merkabas, those really large ones, the last ones we talked about. So we just went through this period. March 15th of 2010 is when the Ettore side of the monadic passages opened. Over here, we're going to have another period where the monadic passage on the Adore side, which is that counterspin side, opens. And there's going to be a point before that, which happens when, this is around September 2nd of 2010, this year, where they cross through, and it begins opening this area, which is referred to as the Amareya passage. So there's a set of things involving these spirals, and these spirals are actually coming down through the probability maps that we looked at, the Milky Way and M31 and all of that. They're actually spiraling down through those, through into our solar system, through into our planet. They're both coming down. There's a certain point where the Metatronic spiral is also doing the same thing, coming right through the galactic core, interacting through our solar core, coming down into our planet core. So it's not shown on this one, but there's a point, if we just looked at the one spiral that is the clockwise one coming in that we saw in the other diagram. When that comes around, it's right over in this axis right here when that Metatronic spiral starts its takeover, right? Where it goes past, interfaces it, and then tries to bend and harness the quantum. So it's right over in through here, and that right there is really the point where it grabs it. We're going to start feeling resistance and pull. Even though we've got the monadic passage open, there's going to be more influx of positive energy coming in, or strength-feeling energy that you can feel from the Christic spiral coming in here. There's going to be even more over here when the monadic passage on the Adore side opens, but it's like from that point until this point, which is August 6th of 2011, that's when the things that are going to end up dragged into the Metatronic harness, that will be the strongest point of pull. That's when the yank will happen, when they start frequency-wise being pulled over. The DNA starts being pulled over into the harness.
At what point does that pull, that sort of negative pull, really start a little before that?
Yeah, it starts.
Give me a date for that.
Now, this one starts, let's see, around February 16th of 2011.
Okay. So February 16th to August 11th, did you say?
Yeah, August 6th,
August
2011.
6th of 2011.
Yeah, that is a point where the dueling spiral effect, will be felt. Yet we have three of the Christic activations. The one that just happened, that we're starting to feel the perk on now, right? The one that's coming when a part of this Amareya passage opens. That's the vertical passage, and then there will be another perk when the Adore side of the monadic passage opens. So we'll be getting strengthened before. The crystal spiral will be getting strengthened before it gets hit with the Metatronic harness. So that's why in this time period, if people start just even working with trying to link with the crystal spiral, that's the first step. And that's not that hard. That has to do with that code that's floating around over there called the Alleria that we'll talk about before this is over. It's the beginning. You're not going to fix your whole light body structure, maybe in 5 million years by just staring at that code. But that is the linking code to link into what's called the reservoir that is being built of crystal spiral frequency in the core of the planet. So this will be the period of most resistance. What it's going to look like in the mass drama, I have no idea. Because as this stuff goes on, the real fight isn't so much between the Christics. The Christics are opening these passages where they will have enough strength if they're working with their with Christic intent, and they have the DNA to anchor it, they will pretty much ride through that. But in this period, you have actually a Metatronic spiral coming in, a takeover spiral, with two competing groups controlling it. It's like you have a spiral and one line is red and one line is green, and they are fighting, not just to take everything, but to take everything away from each other. So that's where there may be wacky stuff in the mass drama that occurs, flare-ups over here and over there, and somebody throwing bombs at each other or whatever. So that is a bit of a it ought to be interesting to watch the news that period, right? Just to see. As we move past this, this is where the harness will start, and one time wave is going to follow the Metatronic spiral and go into the harness effect. and the other is going to go past it. So we're already got the two time waves going, but the Christic time wave is just starting to come into activation. It will grow stronger as these monadic passages open. When it'll go through this period where the Christic spiral will be strong enough to not be taken over by the other. But the rest of the planet that's sitting there doing nothing and not bothering about it, doesn't want to know about it, doesn't even know what the word chakra means, right? Well, fine. But the planet is going to anchor that Metatronic spiral, and it's going to activate the Metatronic part of your DNA if you don't do something to change that, right? Because it's just quantum override. The planetary field is bigger than yours, quantum-wise, and it's going to drag you in to the same configuration of the planet. So the planetary body itself is going to allow that harness to occur, yet we're going to be riding that larger time wave, which is actually, it's a slower time wave. This starts to accelerate and compact and get faster and faster and tighter and more squashed feeling, where this starts to expand and it seems like it goes slower and just expands out, where it's a different time quality, and that's going to be coming more and more into into our experience as we move through this. When we get to here, now this is interesting. We move into 2012 here. At this point, there are other passages that open here that correspond with the ones on their opposite vector, right? So this begins our journey into 2012. There are various activations that happen at each of these stages, and again, this is where you got the two time waves running, and it's important to pick, to choose which time wave you want to ride, and to actively interact, consciously evolve, and interact with the frequencies of the one that you want to follow that path, or the other will just take you down the road with it. When we get to this point, over in here, this is, they call it the 12, 12, 12, 12, 11, 11, 11, 11 point for various reasons that have to do with other dynamics on other graphs. But this is the December 21st through 22nd, 2012. All right. This is the point where you've got full. And this is the point where if it weren't for this other crystal spiral coming in, this thing would have grabbed what of the Christic spiral coming in, grabbed it, rolled it over, and this is where it would create pole shift. It would push and drag the whole thing right into pole shift. It would have dragged the planet into pole shift. It would have shifted the rods as well, and it would have been the last extinction. That's not going to happen because the crystal spiral is coming in, and it's not creating enough to stop it, because if you tried to stop that Metatronic spiral, once it starts, it'll implode in the core. So once it's activated, it's going to go and it's going to take something. So what could be done is what the Christics are doing is the counterpole of having that larger, slower spiral is actually going to just slow a little bit the speed of that. So it'll hit 55, but not a full 55 activation. It will not be able to do the blend with the parallel side to form the 55 that then goes up to, 33, 55, 80 something, whatever, in the Metatronic sequence. They won't be able to make that leap. And we're going to hold them there for 200 years while the gates are open. I'm sure they're not really thrilled about that. We're not fighting with them. We're just holding, standing in the Christ. So there's interesting things that are going to take place during this period that we'll look at before we go that have to do with the precession of the equinoxes and what is actually aligning, because there is a blast from the past that's coming in from the center of the Milky Way, where it's actually coming in from the parallel side through the center of the Milky Way, and it's going to interface directly through our sun with our Earth, and it's meant to hit the rods, and it's meant to knock the rods to actually make them spin, and it would spin one way, one the other, and literally crack the plates of the equator. And I mean, something like that, there's no life left on the planet after something like that. And this is what the whole 2012 thing was about with the Mayan calendar and all of that. They saw an end time. They were warned about it. They were told they were going to be taken off planet. In the ancient days, the Mayans were, because they're connected with the Anu races. And so they were told that you are children and we'll come and save you, that kind of thing, when the end times come. This end time was known since, this drama would unfold at this time, since 22,326 BC, because that was the last stellar activation cycle, when the gates opened. They cannot do this when the gates are closed, or it would just blow up the planet. So they had to wait till the next natural increment when the gates would open, and then they were going to go for the final conflict drama, and that's what we're watching. So it's not a new drama. This is the end of a very old one. But it's it isn't the greatest outcome that could have happened. It wasn't, when the Voyager's books were written, what was hoped would occur. But the choices that were made on this planet by the consciousness field here, they could have done more with that information. They didn't. No, I mean, I was the one with the little workshops, and the ones teaching the other paradigm had much bigger ones, and that was fine. It just meant who was running which Merkaba, right? There was a lot of people running the antichristic Merkaba mechanics. Every person is a unit of energy on this planet. If half of those had spun their Merkabas this way, we might have held the Bridge Zone project. But it didn't. It was a choice that was made by the consciousness on the planet. And that's okay. You know, we're still standing. We'll still stand on the crest, even if only 3 people show up. You know, it was never about how many. But it is as far as the grids go. The grids were oversaturated with the amount. And it was not just from here. It's also from other things that are being done, like HARP and various other machines that look like museums in France, and things like that, that are actually machines that are set up to create very specific, repeated patterns of cycling pulses, right? Even sometimes there are like speed limits set on very busy highways to keep a certain pulse in the grids. That 55 is real popular. Oh, yes. I mean, it is. There are people that consciously design these things in this planetary culture. This isn't an accident. Nothing here happens by accident, and rarely is it anything to do with what it appears to be. You know, that's just the way how the Illuminati game works here. But it's like, get over it. You know, we're on a prison planet, and there's still an escape route. This is good, right? One of the things that's important is when people are confronted with some of this information, it can be overwhelming. It's like, oh my God, I just want to be dead. You know, get me out of here. No, dead is not the answer. The worst thing a person can do is commit suicide right now, because your consciousness, if you drop the body on purpose, the consciousness will be stuck in this field. You want to be a ghost here while it goes down? Your body is your greatest gift right now, because in your body, if you run it the right way, if you bring in the proper frequencies, it will be your salvation. It will actually anchor the crystal spiral because you have human codes, and that will bring you out of it. And you won't at that point, you won't feel like it was so horrible. You can deal with this. Honestly, you get over the shock, and you kind of go, ooh, well, I'm going to have a good day tomorrow anyway, right? And it's an adjustment process when you're processing this kind of a huge amount of information that you've never heard before. But I just want to, make it clear that suicide is not the answer. That's how to get stuck here. It's not worth doing. There's always a solution to get out. Your body will help you. You can anchor these frequencies in your body, and it will set your spirit free. So whenever, even if you do a normal, bardo and your body eventually dies, you won't be stuck in the 55 activation. But if you leave because you can't deal with the thought of having a 55 activation, you're going to get stuck in it. So I just wanted to say that because I know this can be intimidating to some people. All right, so anyway. Now, excuse me. So what I want to do is get to the point where we talk a little bit about some of the things that do occur. So that big mystery about what's aligning with what. Oh, the galactic core does something. Oh, that was in 1983. I mean, they're all like the internet. They're saying this group's saying this group's saying that. Everybody's trying to figure out what this big galactic core alignment is. Because honestly, in certain ways, if you lined it up, it actually happened somewhere in the 80s. That's not the alignment. It's not about that. It is about the rods and the chambers and what they're doing. So we'll look at those in a minute. But this little time cycle here, it's about the spirals and how they're expanding out. And the simple thing that people really need to do is they need to decide which path. Do they take this information seriously enough to say, well, better safe than sorry. You know what I mean? Let's try that crystal spiral and see if I like it, Because if you don't like it, you can always go back to the Metatronic way, no problem. There's nobody holds you here, you know what I mean? It's a free will thing. But anyway, I want to get to the graphs that have to do with a little bit on the body too. But before that, I want to show you one more thing. We're back way up at the top in our cosmic matrix, seeing our little Vecca system with the black holes next to us that are trying to suck us in and that kind of thing. Up here again is the Aquarian matrix. That is where the Crystal River host groups are coming from, the Adashi Adepts are coming from. And they are literally sending a frequency bridge down. It's actually acting like a respirator for this planet because it's coming down. It partially goes through the solar gates, but only partially. But it's coming down, and it wraps almost like two currents that come down, and they're meeting in the center, the core of the Earth. If they weren't doing that in the core of the Earth, there's a thing that happens in a solar system, and it's just part of the natural mechanics of a solar system. If you have a sun that's Pranaseed closes and it enters its Bardo cycle, all of the planets or stars in that system that have the natural circulation with it will follow suit. They will all close their Pranaseeds, and they will all prepare to die together. This planet was going to go into that. If that happened, all the gates would shut except the wormholes. And this is actually the cosmic respirator at the moment. There are two currents that are coming down. What do they call that again? That's a big word. Yeah, I trip over my tongue on that all the time. Ancestation passage, they call it. And it is literally frequency currents that are coming down and forming a loop, coming in through the earth rods, I imagine, and literally holding the core open so the Pranaseed doesn't close, so the gates can still circulate energy, and so the host can go, and that will stay for 200 years. And when that pulls up, the Pranaseed's going to close, and the natural process of Bardo for the solar system is going to unfold. So whoever does stay here after the 200 years is going to have a very interesting evolutionary experience, because there's going to be progressively more limited resources. You're going to watch species go extinct at hugely fast rates because they want out, right? They're just like, okay, out of here, we're leaving the planet. You're going to see large groups of people doing that, be it from earth changes or wars or whatever, because it is the last call. But we've got 200 years before that point comes, fortunately. Now, what the solution is we need to reverse mutate as much as we can the light body structure and turn back on the spirit body, light body flows that have been blocked by these fields, and get the junk DNA to reassemble so it can process the natural atomic and chemical changes that would occur in a body when it goes through the activating the Merkaba process, because it is a biochemical process. The part in the process called fetal integration, that is when the consciousness from the spirit body begins to enter the fetal body in the baby, right? It starts to come in. It starts to bond the spirit body consciousness into the atoms. It's actually partially bonded into the atoms. It's called the jari. That's the part of the consciousness that actually is stuck with the atoms, the part of your living consciousness that forms your atoms. And that part, when you go through a natural Bardo or ascension cycle, the jari is freed, and the atom is able to go through a biochemical process that involves an element or a transient element called celestaline. There's something called a celestaline wave. It has to do with the substances they used to call white powder and blue powder gold. All right, they're monoatomic, but they're natural monoatomic atoms that just form, and they allow the body to become a superconductor where the angular rotation of particle spin on the atoms can shift. They blend instead of annihilate with their antiparticle, their natural antiparticle, and they can go into ascension. So the biochemical processes that we're working on, they're directly connected to the DNA, directly connected to the epigenetic overlay that is triggering the DNA and telling it what it can and can't do. The techniques that we've been working with all along have progressively. We started with fixing the light body structure, then different layers of that, then what's called the crystal body structure that's part of the light body structure. Then we went into turning back on the core flows of the spirit body structure. Now we're working with what's called the Ajay body structure, which is the part of this anatomy that brings those two together and allows the core flows to happen where you can actually go into orb. These little orbs we see in some of these photos and those kind of things, eventually we will be able to turn ourselves into those as a traveling medium. What you don't see with an orb, a natural orb, would have its Merkaba fields moving around it, right? They're the parts you don't see, but you might get a photograph of the orb itself, right? You can also have orbs that are coming from the other system as well, where they are using the Death Star Merkaba, and you can't tell just by seeing the orb. You would have to be able to see the structures of its system and whether it had a poison apple-shaped magnetic field around it, or whether it had the natural thing that looks like a butterfly, which is the natural electromagnetic field. So anyway, when we're going to think about reverse mutating, it has to do with techniques, not techniques in a laboratory where you have somebody go play with your DNA. You play with your own DNA by literally, first of all, knowing what pieces of the anatomy you're trying to turn on and trying to heal, and working with them directly through certain breathing techniques, through certain visualization exercises, through certain projection exercises. There are even certain movements and some yoga moves that the Guardians refer to as logas, because you also use energy work with the chakras with them and things. There are things to do that help the body to get into the space where these things can be repaired, so you do become able to do these. We have structures in the body that have to do with, these were in some of the earlier teachings. It shows the density 1 body, and this would be your density 2 body. If things were normal right now, say you could say this was your Earth body and this was your Terran body, Terran density 2, right? But we actually have these fields on each density level. This would be your soul level body, and this would be your incarnate level. If you had the density 3 one here, you'd have your oversoul, then you would have your avatar, then you would have your rishi level. Now, this is 3 dimensions here, this is 3 here. They each have their radial body structure. They are connected, but these have to be opened. So these become a 6-dimensional structure because the gates that we're going through require the 6-dimensional structure that actually has a 24 to 48 strand capacity, which is where the host comes in and those fancy Merkabas come in. But part of what this is, and we have the light body training courses that are in like the K23 manual and that stuff, they teach you how to open these things, like this part of how do you fix stuff, right? And see, there's certain activations that will then, now this one's starting to get different shaped, right? You do certain other activations, you still have your spherical one up there, but this is starting to look like a flame, right? And then, when you finish those sets of activations, you've got your flame body activated. That's the 6-dimensional aspect, all right? Now, before we do this, there's one thing that can be done to link with that spiral when it's coming in, the crystal spiral when it's coming in, and at least then you're linked with that. But if you want to actually try to clear the other mutations out so you have a stronger field and so you don't get that Metatronic pull as badly from your own DNA as the Metatronic one's coming in, it's worth working with these technologies if you haven't done the activations before. And there's tons. There's a newcomer set of techniques and activations where to start this process. But it is a process, and you don't have to bury yourself in it. But a couple times a week do that, or do a little bit of that, and try to work with the technologies, and also ask the guardians to say, would you help me with this? Another thing I want to say about asking the guardians, I get a little tired of people saying, the guardians attacked me, they came and they had astral sex with me. I said, hello, that is not the guardian. The Guardian Alliance does not do that. That's not allowed. No sexual contact whatsoever, no abusive. They don't yell at you, they don't tell you to do things, they don't say you have to, they don't say you must. If there's something they'd really like you to do because they think it's in your best interest, they'll request that you do it, but you can always say no. So if open rapport and communication does come, there's all sorts of things out there calling themselves Guardian Alliance that are not. And you have to be careful with that. Our DNA right now, if you've done nothing with your DNA to get your line clearer, it runs 2 lines. It'll actually run 3. You can run a Christic one, a green one, or a red one, which means an Anunnaki one, a Drac one, or a Christic one. So we've all got combinations of those codes. So anyway, I just wanted to add that in there because we get a little tired of hearing people say, I'm going to go to the newspapers. I was like, well, good luck with that. But that's not us. You know what I mean? That's not our guys. They don't do that. In fact, we've taught against that, and we've taught to watch out for that for ages. If they were going to do that, they wouldn't be teaching not, to look out for that because people are doing it.
Also make it clear that other people who offer to activate your DNA for you or your flame body for you is at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah, there's been another thing that some well-meaning or not people have done where they'll say, I'll give you a session and I'll activate your 12-strand pattern for you. I'll activate. There's nobody that can do it for you but you. It has to be you that does it. You have to choose. There are simple techniques. They're not hard. They're simple meditation techniques. It's really funny. When people first start them, they usually fall asleep halfway through the tape, or maybe a quarter of the way through the tape, because the DNA can't hold all the frequencies it brings in yet. But the more you use the tape, the more you'll find that you can stay awake during it, right? Even if you don't stay awake, you're still picking up some of the activation. The point where you can actually stay awake through the whole thing means you expanded the DNA activation level enough to hold the level of frequency that tape was bringing in. All right, so as far as having other people fix you when it comes to DNA activation, you are much, much safer to just look at various techniques, feel which one feels better for you, and use that one, and not have somebody else. Because you know what? Nobody else can activate your DNA for you, but they can transfer things into your DNA that weren't there otherwise. They can implant you that way, and some people are being used that way. Sometimes they don't even know it, that they're well-meaning. But where did they think? Like, what kind of ego does it take to say, I'm going to go activate your DNA for you? Hello? Get your ego in check. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
Anyway, let's talk a tiny bit about monatomic gold because there's a lot of misinformation about that.
Yeah, we put out an article about that quite a while ago. It's don't take it. Just let's start there. There is a natural version of that, an organic version of that, in an organic ascension process, or even just Stargate passage process, that the body secretes itself. That there used to be a horrible period in Egyptian history and Atlantean history where angelic humans were captured as soon as they did a gate cross and killed so they could scrape the powder off their skin before it evaporated, because if the ones that didn't have gate codes took a little bit of it, it would give them a temporary burst where they could force themselves through a gate. It becomes addictive, and it actually destroys the body if it's not made within the body itself. And it's a product of a natural transient element called celestaline. We've talked about, this gets into some of the heavier atomic things that we've talked about in some of the workshops, that has to do with a substance called hydrolase, which is living water, sort of. Yeah, it's water with nitrogen, isn't it? That bonds to it, yeah. It's a natural state of water, where the water here is actually mutated because of the way the planetary grids are. So as far as taking the outside substances, you know, if you have to take something because your doctor tells you have to, we say, you know, don't throw away medical advice right now. We're all walking a double line down here. Like, if I had to, I would go to a doctor. If the doctor said take an antibiotic, I would. All right?
That's very insight.
Sirens. Another one.
Gradually getting far away.
Far away, yeah.
So start with the thing about don't throw away the doctor, and then you would go to the doctor.
Yeah, I mean, we don't tell people to stop medical treatment or even psychiatric treatment. You have to be careful there and find somebody qualified enough and awake enough themselves to respect your choice of spirituality. Right? Because a lot of for psychiatry, a lot of places you go say, yeah, I've been astral projecting and it's getting on my nerves, I'll put you on a drug, right? Oh, you're having, no, actually I'm having astral projection, hello? You know, if they can't deal with that conversation, find another doctor. If it's a physical symptom, there are certain things we can work to help fix in ourselves. But there are certain conditions that if you want to keep the body alive longer, you may have to have that, you know, what may be intrusive at the moment, and that's always a personal choice. You know, I would probably be much less likely to rely on a doctor for myself than I would be for my child, for example. Right? I might take chances with me, but I'm not going to take it with, you know, with my children or someone I love, or, you know, my husband or something. So that's personal, but we're not one of those groups that say, oh, everything has to be holistic, and, you know, eventually, yes. Eventually we'll all go back to being breatharians, and we won't have to eat, because we'll be able to do solar symbiosis and actually create hydrolase in our body just by breathing air and sunlight. And that's what our bodies are supposed to do. They don't do that really well right now, so if you try to be a breatharian, you tend to starve to death and get very sick. So there are places, we're right now in a space of evolution where there are changes we need to make in our biology just to hold the ascension potential and to start activating it. And then there are changes that will come naturally, but if you try to force them, you're going to actually make yourself sicker. Some people went on the big vegetarian kick. Now, I like the concept of vegetarian, but if you just eat vegetarian, your fields get very, very high and buzzy, and they fit right in with the Metatronic acceleration that has been going on with the sextant clock. That's why we've said, you know, a bit of protein. If you really can't stand meat protein, fine. If you want to be vegetarian, but be aware that high buzzy feeling that you get, this is not good. All right, that's too much electricity. It means you're processing too much frequency coming in, and that means you're going into that time wave that's very choppy time wave that's connected with the Metatronic activations. So there's so much trickery where it appears to be a good thing, but it isn't always what it appears to be. You know, those kind of things. So as far as monatomics, wouldn't touch them. You know, feel the same about colloidal silver, honestly. Right now, that's just a personal preference if somebody wants to do that. But just the feel I get, and the guardians kind of go, not saying a word because we're not going to get into it. But it's like, yeah, just trust your feeling. Okay, not for me, right? So I just kind of use my own radar with that. And really, they try to support becoming energetically self-sufficient as much as possible. Of course, we still have to eat and those kind of things. But, you know, relying on all sorts of vitamins, all sorts of drugs, all sorts of foods, all sorts of this, all sorts of that all the time weaning is a little bit. But if you're, say, taking meds for manic depression or something, don't just throw them out the window. You're going to have really bad results because that crosses the blood-brain barrier or whatever and gets in the blood system, and you can have really bad withdrawal. You got to stage those kind of withdrawals. And some of them are just not worth getting in the first place. If you start taking monatomics, it will create a dependency in the body, even though science has not identified that yet. And it will also do something that something else does too. And for some people, that's good, but for other people, they have enough of that happening, and it shouldn't. There are certain substances now that I won't name them, but they're popular supplements. They're not drugs. They're just supplements. But they actually accelerate the speed at which frequency from the light body processes into the atomic structure. That can be good for some people who have a sluggish field in certain ways, but it can actually override and take it into Metatronic twist for other people whose flows are faster or even normal. So it's very individual with that, with those kind of things. Eventually we'll have more guidelines, and eventually they're going to let us know a little bit more about what foods are more Metatronic than others and those kind of things, which would come down to what trees are Metatronic and what ones are Christic, what animals, what, I mean, it gets to the point where it's hard enough to look at what teaching sets, and what people are affiliated with them. It's almost heartbreaking in a way to have to see which is going which way. But eventually, as we work with our bodies, especially if we're serious about getting the physical body through. I mean, you don't have to get a physical body through to be able to ascend. What you do have to do, if you are just saying, well, I can do a normal death and, that gets my spirit out, there's one thing that's very important. And this shows you the horror that's been run here. How many teachings and how many systems, cultures from the past that can even be remembered bury bodies? When you bury a body, it's trapped the body cell. It is anchored to that space-time location. The spirit is trapped to the space-time location. If a person bardos out, there's a natural process, the chakras shutting down, the dark matter template separating, the consciousness pulling itself out and up, and it needs to release the body cell. Cremation is the way it was always done. Now, normally, if your DNA is working the right way, you wouldn't have to worry about somebody burning your dead body for you, because you would actually transmute it yourself and just have somebody lay it down in a room for 3 days and it would disappear, because you would turn it into vapor and pull that part of your consciousness out, and there'd be a little dust left, and that was the vibhuti left from the body cell that was the donated quantum from your two parents that gave you the fetal pattern to begin with. So this is one of the horrors here. How many religions are teaching to bury? That is the absolute opposite of Christian teachings, of ascension teachings, and it's heartbreaking. But there are a lot of rescue missions that do go on in the planes, the various plane structures of Earth, because the guardian groups know this, and people are getting stuck here for eons, right? So there are particular times when the guardian, they're called way showers, will come in and actually round them up and say, okay, there's certain things you have to do. They have to release that connection, and that's quite a physics mechanics thing, kind of a little bit like brain surgery. But there are guardians that do service them. So if you have people that you love that died and are buried, you might want to put out a good word to whoever the way showers of the Christ are. And they're not always just the Guardian Alliance people. There's lots of Adashi adepts and people out there that handle these things. But if you want to solve that problem in the first place, if you're not planning on getting your body to the point where it can do a full transfiguration, because it is sometimes a lot of work. At some point, you're going to have to change your diet. At some point, you're going to have to spend more time focusing in say, meditative spaces or projection spaces than you are focused here. And that can, get in the way of your life down here. It's okay to die as long as you do it well and take your quantum with you, and that means cremation. And that's another thing that people might hate my guts for. Sorry. Yeah, since they're hating my guts, I might as well say the other one. It's on the other end, the fetal integration one. Yeah. You were wondering if I was going to do that. Yeah, might as well. In the natural process, it's been explained very, very clearly, the fetal integration process, from the point when an egg and sperm come together. I mean, down to the first 12 seconds. The second, what happens? What part of the spirit body grows first? What part of the light body starts to grow then as the flesh is expanding out, etc. 33 to 56 days after conception is when the soul can start to integrate, or the spirit can start integrating into that body. Until that point, yes, the body is alive. It is being fueled by the quantum donated by the two parents. If a being dies in that period, it is not attached to the body yet. It is not stuck. So there is a window of 33 to 56 days when, if a person aborted, let's say, that doesn't mean we support abortion. People really should be spiritually aware enough not to get themselves in that position in the first place. But down here, that can be difficult sometimes, especially in, like, if you're raped or something like that. But 33 to 56 days, usually the 56th toward the 56th end now, like the way the mutation is running here, before the spirit can start to integrate into the fetal body. Because if it did, it would explode the fetal pattern and it would kill the fetal body. So there is a window there where, yes, you have a baby in there, and yes, you have a spirit that's probably wanting to come into it, but it's not in yet. It will start fetal integration 33 to 56 days. And that's another one. So if everybody really wants to not like me, they can play with that too. You know, I'm sure the Catholic people won't be happy with me at all, and I'm sorry. I won't even get into where the Bible came from. In the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, when Rome decided it wanted to unify all its territories and called everybody together and created the canonized Bible by taking pieces of old records from various places. So we all have our own beliefs, and I really hope the people of other faiths can respect ours, and we will respect yours. Anyway, let me get back on the grass so I get done with these. Boy.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine.
Oh, talk about just hitting every little bit that...
Well, that's what we're all about here.
It just felt like it was the right place to put that. I don't know why.
Pushing the envelope.
Well, it's already been said. I mean, these things have been published, they've been said in our workshops, but I've never been on YouTube.
Well, get ready.
It's a duck, right? Oh, God.
Well, you are on YouTube illegally.
Yeah, I heard I was illegally. Somebody's putting it on some...
You
got it down.
And a lot of people have come to get materials because of that.
Let's see where I'm going. Right, okay. So anyway, there's a series to show. Oh, yeah, I'll show this one just because it's cool.
At some point we want to talk about the 2012, from there on, what happens, and the fact that that's not the end of the world, and that they're not going to ascend on that day, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, their story of they were going to ascend on that day meant you were going to become extinct on that day. Yeah, if the Metatronic crew had their way. Anyway, I want to show a couple of things because I want to get to one point that shows something that is important that has to do with the what to do. The linking code, there is a linking code, and I'll show you how it works. But first I just want to, they're asking me to put these up just to get a view on these. These are, we showed the light body structure of the flame body and the activations. The part of the activations that when you do the flame body, it also begins activating these parts of the field that are part of the chariot of fire. So we'll be activating those parts. They build up to activating the Christ star vehicle, the Merkaba levels that build up to the Christ star vehicle, and that builds up to activating the Amaranth. Just hold it there. Yeah. Okay, now. Go back to the Alleria. No, that's not the Alleria, it's the Lumiridana. That's the spirit body structure, right? I wanted to point out, in the spirit body structure, again, those 12 lines, right? It's actually 6 vectors that form 12 event horizons, right? And that's where the flows are. This is something very important because between the Rasha body, which is the dark matter template, and the spirit body, there's something very interesting that happens. These things are called chambers. Now, on the light body structure, these 12 chambers would be called fire chambers. On the spirit body, they're called Allurian chambers. They are actually the chambers within which they interact with the dark matter body that form atomic structure when the body is working properly. This is how stars actually birth atoms, and they don't just birth a few, like 3 primary ones, and they all bump in together and then form the next couple. It doesn't work that way. When it's actually functioning normally, a planet, a star, or a person generates their own 144 elements, prime elements, that then go to form the natural chemicals that would be in the body and all of that kind of thing. So there we have the template, the human aspect of, of this mixed race we call humanity. The angelic human aspect does have the core pieces of fragment DNA that correspond to each of those 144 elements. Right now on the planet body is not manufacturing 144 elements because of the mutations. But we can begin turning them back on in our own body because we are connecting now not just to the metatronic spiral that is working here, but we are progressively connecting our bodies into the Christic spirals that are being hosted by healthy living systems, which means there's an alternative of energy flows that we can use. We can begin the process of activating our Illyrian chambers. And the Illyrian chambers are interesting if you take away all the other things like in the, the spanner gates and all that, and just look at the basic structure. On one density level, just like when we looked at the things that became the spherical maps, where there were 4 of those sets, right, embedded. Well, this is 4. You have one for D1, D2, D3, and then what's called the density level one, and that's the one that corresponds to, let's say, the space between D3 and D4. All right, so you again have a 4-level structure. Each one of these, like say on D1, manufactures a set of 12, a set of 12. These each manufacture one of the elements, one of the 144 elements. When you take it all the way up to the 12-dimensional structure, you will get the 144 elements. So each line corresponds with a certain specific set. On D1, it'll be this. On D2, it steps down to that. On D3, it steps up to that. We went through a whole series of things that explained this process in depth, right, as far as how the elements are manufactured, how they're supposed to be manufactured in the natural structure of the spirit body. And it had our own atomic chart, like the kind that resembles the atomic chart that you see in physics class or whatever. But there is another way to, instead of like analyzing and memorizing each one of those by their proton number and all that kind of stuff, because that's what it is. It's the proton numbers. That's how how science here keeps track of it. And it's the same thing. It's the same atomic chart. You have your hydrogen all the way up to things that don't have names yet because they haven't found 144 here because they're not here yet. There's a way to trigger the pieces of DNA that are connected to each of these. We still have the dormant encryption in the DNA. But because it's not materializing on the planet because of the mutations, it isn't assembling in the DNA or our bodies. And some of those elements are essential to the biochemical processes of transfigurative ascension. There is a way. Now again, if we look at this pretty little thing, this is again putting the flows back where we just had the lines showing there, the lines with their atomic numbers on them, right? This actually is there's 4 layers to this, which corresponds to the 4 sets there, and it has its 12 flows. Each of these has certain sets of colors that not only go with what comes up the center line, but if you'll notice on this one, and I have it upside down, if you notice on this one, it has to do with the circulation where energy comes up one of these and then flows down these. It actually comes up through, I believe it goes out. Which ones are axiotonal? This is the interface between the 12 lines that are of the spirit body and the 12 lines that are of the light body. And there's an interaction between them, and it's through that, and you also have the Rasha body in there. There's 3 different currents running that actually form the elements that are the atomic elements. And these flows that actually come up here, and I just have them going over here and then come back down here. So there's this interaction where these base elements here will come up and they manufacture other ones as they interact with the currents that are coming up here, and these currents split and come down here, and that's going on all the way around, right? So there's this whole set of mathematical interactions that take place in the structures that unite the Rasha dark matter body, the spirit body, and the light body, through which the atomic body is formed. And these numbers correspond to the colors that correspond to the frequency bands of each of these. There would be a color. There is a color spectrum that goes, say, 1 through 12. 1 is red, D1 is red, D2 is orange, D3 is yellow, all the way up to D12, which is that white, the liquid light white color. So the colors correspond to the frequencies, and the colors correspond to, these colors would change on each line because the numbers change. It's called the mix master, and this has to do with quite a complicated process of what angles, which dimensional level is at. So they're not all on the same. You might have axiotonal line 1, say, here, and then it becomes line 4 on this level, and then it might be line 6 on this level because of the shifts in these spheres where they're not all with their 12s pointed up, in other words. So it is literally the atomic creation factory that our bodies are supposed to be, that a planet body is supposed to be, a star body is supposed to be, to begin triggering the activation of those 144 presently dormant, most of them, elements in the body, this code can be used through optical pineal induction. Now, it works a bit in its black and white form, where it shows its number correspondences. And the number correspondences correspond to colors and to the information that is actually on this chart, right? The technical mathematical information. But it is most powerful when it's in color, where its colors radiate. And we've been very, very fortunate. There's a lovely lady named Sue from England that does all our code work, and she does an amazing job with taking the codes. And it's this code. It's called the Alaria Rashatan. And this is the linking code into what is called, something that's actually activating this weekend, that is called they call it the Orb Reservoir, but it's actually the Aurora Reservoir. It is in the core of the planet, there's going to be a reservoir of energy coming in now from the Aurora continuum and carrying the Christic spiral frequencies. And that, just using this code, which actually contains the whole imprint, the whole template, for the 144 different elements, and simply you can just put out the intention, go down to Earth core, holding an image of it in your mind, just kind of like even inhale it once and go, and just send down to Earth core with the intention that I want to ride the crystal spiral, right? And that is a start. That will link. It's that simple to link. Now, once you link, then there's the light body and the various pieces of yourself you might want to put back together if you want your fields to be strong enough to handle the periods that are going to come up in between now and 2012. But it is the simplest host I have ever seen. We didn't have it this easy. The groups didn't. We had to work piece by piece, starting with the light body, just to be able to fix that level so we could bring those frequencies in so they could activate on the planet, right? So we did a lot of hard work to get it to the point where this reservoir could be created that is available to anybody who chooses to choose to go on the Christ host. So that is the first step. There's other stuff you can do, and we already have tons of techniques to begin the other parts for people who want it. If you don't want it, that's fine. But that is a linking code, and it's directly keyed. It's not just a pretty little picture. It is directly keyed to the atomic chart, the Alaria chambers, the Alarian chambers chart. There's a whole set of workshop things that go with this, so I just tried to paraphrase it fast. I wanted to get that in there, and there's one more thing I would like to get in here. Oh, look at this. We're at the bottom of the pile. I'm so happy. Yeah, I mean, I love talking about it, but I get weary, just like people get weary listening to me. It's like, yeah, I need a wake-up band sometimes in the workshops.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Do not worry.
Okay. All right, I'm going to try to do these the simple way. There's a lot of information in these, and I don't have to, I'm not going to read all the little pieces and stuff, that takes forever, but this information is in the Ireland workshop, which is what, Sliders 5? 6. That was 6, right? Sliders 6 workshop has the whole set of these charts and talks about this. What you're looking at here is our sun, okay, in the center. This would be our, the solar plane, or where Earth is orbiting around the sun. And it's not done in scale, like, it's just done with that sun at the center just to show these relationships. Over here, you would have Earth with its staff and its rods and shield at its tilt, right? So actually, this is one of the rods, and this is one of the rods, or chambers. And the tilt here, you can see it on the shields. So that's Earth sitting at this angle in the solar plane, and this is like the solar north up here. The sun also has the two rods and the two chambers, right here. Over here is what you don't see, that because of the way the wormholes are set up, there is a direct counter movement and relationship between parallel Earth that is in that parallel galaxy. They've taken them millions of years actually to build this system, to twist things in this system enough where they could create this. But this is already in sync, and it has been. They had a big victory about 13,000 years ago. I think it was 10,958 BC. It's somewhere down here. Yeah, no, 10,948 BC. Right. So this is what you don't see orbiting right on the opposite orbit of Earth is parallel Earth, and that's on the other side of the wormhole structure. It also has its chambers and rods, and it's also counter-tilted. Where our tilt is this way, they're tilted that way. Through the center gates, the core gates of the sun, they link and they form an open wormhole network at the center of the sun. Now, this is just what happens all the time since they built this system. Okay, this has created the acceleration in the natural Stargate opening cycle, where this one was ours was speeded up to sync with this one. So this could be, and now they're actually tethered by their rods. Now they're still spinning, so there's a period where the rods separate and then come back together again as they're spinning. And this gives you the false precession, the precession of the equinoxes gives you a system that's referred to as the false yugas. And that's something that is also associated with the Metatronic Death Star Merkaba teachings and all of that. You'll find the false yugas cycle. They're actually e-yugas, and they're supposed to be 26,556 years long. And at this point, because they've changed a couple times, they got faster and faster with the sextant distortion. Let me see if we have that here. How fast are they? I think it got cut off on the bottom. Anyway, this system has accelerated the Stargate opening cycle to synchronize it with this one on this planet. So this is part of the reason why a 55 Merkaba activation could actually take our planet and drag it into black hole fall, because it's already linked, and this link occurred 13,000 years ago. All right. There's another link that has to do with this. This little dot back here, and it's not to scale, of course. It's just showing the point in the maps that we would call our the core of the Milky Way galaxy. All right. The Milky Way also has a thing that's rotating in it, even though it's a black hole. There is a thing rotating in it. It also has its chambers and rod, and it spins much longer, slower cycles. There are certain periods of time when these things come into specific alignments, where you have the rods of the Milky Way that are coming through from the black hole system, interfacing directly through our sun, that's interfacing with the parallel side, and you have another parallel side on the parallel Milky Way coming through the center of the Milky Way. Now, this is happening all the time in general, but there are certain periods of time where various things happen. Like in March equinoxes, ever since equinoxes began, March equinoxes, you end up with the parallel one and our Earth crossing over. And when they cross through each other, right, one's at one angle of rotation of particle spin, one's at the other. This one's in the parallel universe, but they are synced, and they literally pass through each other. The core is open temporarily for that period of time. Do you know how many pagan celebrations and old, ancient cultures used to do their fertility rites and their all sorts of interesting ceremonies on the equinoxes and the solstices? This is why they were taught to do them, because things could come in, you get yourselves pregnant over here, things could come in and soul integrate directly right through from parallel. And this is part of the trickery that has been going on here. I mean, great, we got equinoxes and solstices. That's not great. Because they are actually part of the twisted sextant clock that is part of this nasty wormhole black hole vortex system. Then we also have what happens, let's see, which one is this? Do I need that one? No, it's just showing where they blend. Then
okay, we have 3 minutes on this tape, so we may have to switch tapes shortly. So you might have enough for one.
Okay, let's do the June solstice. Okay, so things keep, then they rotate apart again. And we're over here, and then they're over there, right? But they're still aligned directly through the solar gate. So there's another gate opening there. The most powerful one is actually when they totally overlap with each other for that period, and that is in the equinox periods, right? So again, we're going this way, and they're coming this way. We overlap again on the September equinox. We overlap over here this time and pass through each other again. I'll just do these really fast. And then in December solstices.
Okay, are you familiar with the Alice Bailey material?
I've heard of Bailey, but I've not read it.
Okay, and well, they talk about a lot about like the Buddha festival and various festivals that go on various times of the year, and full moons mainly.
Moons, yeah. We haven't even touched on the moon stuff yet. Right. Yeah.
But there has to be, I think, some kind of link up here.
Yeah. I'm sure there
That'd be
is.
great to-
Yeah, I'm sure there's an
touch on
extension of these diagrams that actually show what the moon is doing during all of this, because it's very much tied to.
Yeah, because
yeah.
the full moons are tied to the equinoxes and.
Yeah, we gotta plug the moon into this.
Solstice time, they write my brother.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
1,000.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Bailey did that. Yeah, yeah. I knew the name sounded familiar, and I know the GWB. Yeah, those guys. Okay, so anyway, this is where it gets interesting because here's where you're ending up with rods. You got the solar rod running with the galactic rod, right? You also have the planetary rods aligning through them. So there's this interesting thing happening here because of this one. It's a much more powerful one, and this is the point where certain things could happen. If there were frequencies thrown through here hard enough, you could whack this rod and actually spin our rods and
Okay, and what
shift.
What time of year is this?
This is coming into December, right here. It starts actually around November 21st here, and then the rotation continues, and the alignment is actually this right here. While we're here, and this is our December 21st position, our rod links in here at this angle, which crosses through the solar rod and this one, and that is what allows this, and this to grab that and drag it. So this is still in its November position over here, but this is where it interfaces. We have to be in the December position. This is what they're going to try to do in 2012.